Go ahead, Vince. Start us off, man. Let's get rolling.
You got it, brother. Good afternoon to everybody out there in Irish Breakdown land. I am Vince D'Addario. I'm the football analyst here at irishbreakdown.com. And with me, as always, is Brian Driscoll. And he is the publisher at irishbreakdown.com. And we got kind of an interesting topic to discuss today. And see, look, everybody knows our background. Brian and I are both offensive coaches. And anytime we can talk about, offense, it's a good day. It's a good day. And we both actually have been wide receiver coaches in our history as coaches. So I'm fired up to talk a little bit about wide receivers today. And look, there are many important pieces to what could be the puzzle of this Notre Dame football team. And, this is not the be-all, end-all, but we feel that it is a very, very, very important piece to what this puzzle looks like for a successful Notre Dame team this year. So looking forward to talking about this today. Brian, we're going to break down the wide receivers and why they are so important to what we feel will be a successful offense and then therefore a successful team.
I think this is the group that whose emergence is most important to this entire team because of, like we said, the trickle-down effect of the offense being so important and the receivers being important, but then also some of the question marks that maybe we have that the receivers can then overcome. And that's what makes this an interesting group. And it's been really fascinating having these conversations about wide receivers throughout the entire summer because there are some people that are like, it's a big question mark. And then there are other people that are like, it's going to be great. And then there's a lot of in between. And there's just so much uncertainty about this group, completely understandably, that you look at it and say, boy, we really don't know what this group is going to be, but it needs to be really good because that to me is the key to this whole thing working.
Yes.
And what I mean by that is several things. We'll dive into them individually, but it's the key to Jack Cohn or Drew Pine or Tyler Buckner having success. It's the key to the running backs having success. It's the key to protecting the offensive line. It's the key to this any adaptations or adjustments or things that they're adding to the offense, it's going to be key to those. And then, of course, it's at the end of the day, it's the ultimate key to this football team being able to score with anybody, which then leads to whether or not this football team can compete for a championship. So, Vince, when I look at this group and I say, boy, this unit has to be good, and it's got the talent to be good, but there's also so many question marks. And it really kind of what got us started thinking about this, Vince, was Brian Kelly's comments in his press conference on was it Saturday?
Yeah.
And he talked about the transformational offseason that Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsay and Joe Wilkins had. And we've heard similar things behind the scenes about, Lawrence Keys and Xavier Watts and, the freshmen are working their tails off. I mean, so we're hearing that a lot, but now we're to the point now where it's like, okay, that's great, but now it's time to go play.
Yes.
And all the different things that factor into that. So that's kind of what made this topic sort of interesting was, those comments and Kelly's comments about just how great of an offseason they had. So then that's going to lead us to talk about a few things. Number one, we're going to kind of dive into sort of how the receiving core, well, let's first talk, Vince, about what the receiving core would look like if it plays to its potential. Then the impact that it's going to have on the quarterbacks, the impact it's going to have on the running backs, and then the impact they have on the offensive line. And then through that, we'll tie it in to how it can affect the offense. But then when we get to that, we can kind of talk about just some of the individual players and just what they need to do to make this group work. And that's kind of how we'll wrap it up. So it's going to be, and I think it's good timing because, yesterday we had our CJ Williams commitment video and Tobias Merriweather committed on Wednesday and, talk about how that impacts recruiting. But if you look at it from a recruiting standpoint, this offense needs to be a lot better this year.
Yeah,
and
absolutely.
This group needs to be a big part of that if this team is going to continue to recruit at an elite level.
Well, and they need to be dynamic and they need to make plays after the catch and they need to, they need to be able to bail out their quarterback at times. They need to be a trusted part of this offense. And, I think that there's more than one or two guys that can be that in this offense. So I'm really excited to see kind of where we're headed. We'll see. We'll see how it goes. But again, this is going to be a crucial part of where we think this offense can go. And that's the key part here because, look, we haven't really seen what I've seen with my own eyes at practice is no different than what I've seen in the past, right?
Mm-hmm.
At this point. And so there's still question marks out there. There's still questions. And even though when I saw the wide receivers catching passes from coaches, yeah, they look smooth, they look good, but there's been years where the wide receivers have looked smooth and good, and that's all well and good. That's great. I mean,
again, if they don't look good on the first day of fall camp without pads, then this is going to be a bad year. I mean, so this isn't really even about what we saw on Saturday or what you saw on Saturday. It's about what this group can be.
Yes,
because Vince, if you go to every practice and the receivers are dominating and making plays, that's all fine and dandy. Been there, done that, right? Been there, done that. We've seen Kevin Austin just put on absolute clinics in practice. Don't care. Needs to do it on Saturdays. Well, and in one instance on a Sunday, right? That's the key. Lawrence Keys we've seen. Braden, it's about putting it all together, right? And so to me, when I look at this group and I say, well, how good can this group really be? Number one, it depends on Kevin Austin. And you made a comment about this last week, Vince. I believe it was last week. These weeks kind of bleed, especially last week because we didn't have any days off.
No, right?
Well, you didn't have any days off. But you made a comment about how Kevin Austin is the one guy that can be that absolute dude, right? We talk about how the receiving corps doesn't need an alpha and all that because you've got Michael Mayer and all those kind of things. Doesn't mean that if one doesn't emerge, it's not a positive.
Right.
The one guy to me that can be that guy, really the only guy of anyone that's not a freshman or sophomore that can be that guy is Kevin Austin. And when we talk about alpha, we're not talking about a guy that's just going to catch a lot of passes. Because I think Avery Davis can have very good production. I think Lawrence Keys can have very good production this year if given the opportunity. When we talk about alpha, it's the guy that impacts how you change how you play your entire defense.
Exactly.
Braden Lindsay can do that in a situational manner, but he's not the combination of that plus volume, right? Kevin Austin's is the combination of volume plus dynamic ability, plus you have to figure out what he's doing every play. Now, that's a guy that's had 6 career catches, right? 5 of them came during his freshman season all the way back in 2018.
Yeah, important note. Yeah.
Right. Now, you say, well, what can we expect of that guy? And we've been hesitant to even really talk about him this summer, but it's time to do so because we're getting close to the season. He is at practice. He is, seems to be healthy. And look, here's the deal with Kevin Austin. If Kevin Austin were to break out and have a big year, it's not exactly an unknown thing, right, at Notre Dame. I mean, if you look at Miles Boykin had 18 career catches coming into his senior year. Will Fuller had 6 catches as a freshman in 2013, broke out in 2014. Golden Tate did that. Javon McKinley played very little. What do you have, 11 career catches coming into this past season? He led the team in receiving. And as good as Javon was, and he was, I mean, we've talked about this. When Javon had 5 or more catches, Notre Dame averaged about 40 points a game, right? When he was the focal point of the offense, that offense was really good. Well, Javon's not the same athlete that Kevin is. Never was. As high as I was on Javon McKinley, he was never the athlete that Kevin Austin is. So you've got this guy to say, hey, look, it's asking a lot for him to come out and be that guy because he's never done it. But we've seen this before. We've seen it before where a guy has had this, and we've seen it recently. As a matter of fact, we've seen it 2 of the last 3 years. Chase Claypool was different because Chase had played a ton in his first 3 years. Chase came into the 2019 season with almost 100 career catches already. So that wasn't necessarily unexpected. It was just about taking that next step. This is more about a guy that's never really been anything but a role player or a bench player and then breaks out. Miles Boykin was never a rotation player for Notre Dame, much less a key player. The only reason he even had the number of catches he had was because of the bowl game against LSU when Chase Claypool was out with surgery.
Injuries,
and then EQ checked himself out in the first half with an injury. And so you look at this and you say, well, Kevin Austin has actually been asked to be more of a rotational player more in his career than Miles Boykin was going into 2018. So it's possible, but then I just get a little bit nervous talking too much about it because of his history. But the fact of the matter is 6'2", 215, fast, great one-on-one ball skills, can do things after the catch, can work the middle of the field. There's literally nothing Kevin Austin can't do on a football field.
And that's why he's going to be so special on this team, is because he can do.
They
all
need
of
him
those
to be
things.
special. They need him to be special.
Yes,
that's
because he can. And if you wanted to, you could move him around. You could put him in the field. You could put him in the slot. I mean, you could move him around. He would still be effective because he checks a lot of those boxes of what those guys can do.
Mm-hmm. You know, I think, Vince, that Notre Dame can have a really good receiving core without Kevin Austin being the guy. We've said this over and over again. My stance hasn't changed on that. But it becomes a lot better if he is.
Sure.
That's the thing.
Yes.
If he can be that guy, it just makes things so much easier for you offensively, because he is the kind of guy that you have to adjust your entire game plan for. And if you're and here's why that matters. If Kevin Austin comes out in the first 3-4 games and he's going for 4 or 5 catches each because they're not really prepared for him, they're not playing for him, all those kind of things. Now all of a sudden teams have to game plan for him. You have to game plan for him. You have to game plan for Michael Mayer. You have to game plan for the running backs.
Yep.
Now all of a sudden, Avery Davis, Lawrence Keys, Braden Lindsay, Xavier Watts, Lorenzo Styles, those guys are all now isolation players, where you can't double them up, you can't high-low them, you have to ISO them as much as possible because you have to deal with Michael Mayer and Kevin Austin. And there's a lot of things you can do where you could put those two guys on the same side of the field, knowing that they're going to overload that side, and then, you know, give yourself some matchups. So that's partly why he does that. But the other part of it too is he gives you another big receiver that can be a quarterback's best friend. Whereas if Michael Mayer, you've got your tight ends with Michael Mayer, George Takis, but it is nice to have a bigger guy on the outside. And Joe Wilkins is the next biggest guy of the returners, but Joe Wilkins is not that type of player. I mean, Coach Kelly talked about, how he's had a transformational offseason, and that's great. And I'm hoping
awesome.
that Joe's going to be a really good, rotation player. But if they think he's going to all of a sudden turn into a great player, then they're kidding themselves. And they thought that Ben Skoranek was going to be that, and he's not. Not against anybody that's any good anyway. And so you need Kevin Austin's that guy that gives you that size. The only other one is freshman Deion Colsey.
Sure.
So
right now they have, if you take Saturday's practice, right? So that they had Joe Wilkins starting with that first group, but they had Kevin Austin in the second group. So I mean, that's going to be the natural progression right there, is that Austin will take that spot, and Joe Wilkins will be in that second slot, and that's where he. I don't
know if I would call that a natural. Let me ask Vince so I can make sure that. Are you saying that's what should happen, or is that what you're saying is going to happen?
Both. That Austin's going to be.
Because I don't know if this staff has necessarily proven to us that they're going to make that kind of decision. With all due respect,
I just don't feel here. Okay, agree with you, but at the same time, I don't see how you could watch Austin and Joe Wilkins practice and not think that 4 is better than 5.
Do I need to remind you of all the times that we could have?
I'm just saying, man.
We need to have this conversation again.
I know, but
do you not forget last year and the year before that and the year before that and the year before that? You know what I mean? Like, how could you watch games in 2019 and watch Phil Dracovic play and think, gee, that guy's not good enough for us to maybe try to get him on the field, right?
I know.
I'm just saying.
I feel like we're not talking about freshmen. So
at this position, right? At this position. And look, somebody played a comment for me, or played a video for me, sent me a video of what Connor Radigan was talking about when he was talking about Coach Alexander. This is really hard to earn his trust, and you got to earn his trust and that kind of thing. And is Kevin Austin with his pass going to be allowed to do that? That's a question. At the end of the day, is Tom Reese going to step in and say, "Hey, listen, you need to get on here and
Look, man, I'm sorry, somebody that has any kind of influence, whether it's Brian Kelly, whether it's Tommy Reese, whether it's Jeff Quinn, I don't care. Like that guy needs to be on the first team. Like,
right.
I just, if it was so clear to me, even watching drills, that Kevin Austin is your number one receiver, period. He doesn't belong on the second team, and his spot is where Joe Wilkins is. So I know it seems logical.
Right. Everything you're saying makes sense. I don't disagree with any of it. I'm just saying I don't think we should assume that that's going to happen.
I know.
That's all. But let's get back on track. So
yes,
with Kevin Austin, I think if he steps up and is the player that we think he can be, and he stays healthy for an entire season, what that does, Vince, is that then makes everyone else better. that ultimately is key numero uno to this group playing to its potential, right? And then after that, it becomes about, okay, who steps up as the big play guys, right? Is Braden Lindsay going to be that guy? Can he stay healthy? What does he bring to an offense? I think you need Braden Lindsay to be healthy this year. Again, Braden Lindsay does not have to be a 50, 60 catch guy. He doesn't. If he does, great. I mean, if he's finally able to stay healthy long enough to do that, great. But he doesn't have to be that guy. But they need somebody, whether it's him, whether it's Xavier Watts, whether it's Lawrence Keys, they need somebody to be that, or Lorenzo Styles. They need somebody to step up and be that, take the top off the coverage defense. That is another thing that they did not have last year.
Agreed. Yeah,
they did. They need to protect the run game, to protect the O-line, to protect Michael Mayer. I think they need somebody to be it. And honestly, it's when we have this conversation, we'd be idiots if the first guy we talked about wasn't Braden Lindsay.
Well, no, I mean, you're absolutely right. And let's talk real quick about why it's so important to have a guy that can take the top off, Brian. I'll start the conversation with, look, you need to make sure safeties aren't peeking in the backfield all the time. I mean, you got to make sure that they're not just looking in front of themselves, for those crossing routes and having their eyes in the backfield at running backs and things like that. They have to respect the deep game, right? And that it's twofold. You got to have somebody that is going to be able to take the top off the defense, number one. And number two, you got to have somebody that's willing to throw the ball. And I think that as of right now, barring injury, they have both of those things. But you need that in order to keep safeties honest. Because, look, safeties love coming downhill and smacking some people. Most safeties do, right? And so you need to keep those safeties honest. You need to keep those corners honest. You need to keep the secondary honest by having that guy that can take the top off the field or off the defense.
Right. And I think Braden is the most logical choice to do that.
For this year, yeah, absolutely.
Right. And so, we'll see if that happens, but he's another guy. But this is kind of where you kind of get into the gray area of this unit, and what we've talked about all day is that's why there's so many question marks about this group. I've never heard anyone, no one make a rational argument about how this group doesn't have talent.
Right.
People say all kinds of ridiculous things, but not a rational conversation. It's more been about, okay, but they got to prove it. They've got to stay healthy, that, all these other types of things that are more legitimate conversations. And so, Braden Lindsay's that kind of guy that if he's hungry and he's healthy, he could really add something special to this group. He could be a 40 catch guy that averages over 200 yards and has over 1,000 yards of offense, because he'll have some jet sweeps and some reverses like he did in 2019. And it just adds a different dimension. And it's kind of what I always talk about when we talk about recruiting. You need diversity of skill set. And you've got your big boy in Michael Mayer. You've kind of got your potential every down alpha type of guy in Kevin Austin. This is a different type of skill set. And it's not a shifty make you miss. It's just a flat out outrun you kind of guy. That's the key. And now again, let's add them together. If you can get Kevin Austin at his best, you get Braden Lindsay as just healthy. Now all of a sudden you're a really dynamic and scary group. Then you add in guys like Avery Davis, you add in guys like Lawrence Keys, who are really good route runners and good athletes in their own mind, but those are guys that can maybe do more after the catch, the shiftiness, the make you miss kind of thing. Then you throw in Xavier Watts and his unique skill set into the table. Then you have another speedy guy like a Lorenzo Styles. Lorenzo's going to have an important role to play this year too, because he's the next burner guy, in my opinion.
Right.
If Braden Lindsay goes down, now you're putting a lot of pressure on Lorenzo Styles to step up and be ready to play.
Sure.
At some places that wouldn't concern me as much. Here, if we're being honest and objective, that's a problem. And if you don't like that, and if that triggers you and makes you want to put a thumbs down, A, stop watching our channel, and B, prove me wrong. Okay. Yeah. Because we just talked about this. In 4 years, Notre Dame's had freshmen have caught a combined 9 passes. And those 9 passes were from 2 players. So I'm not saying anything that's not factually accurate. Freshmen don't play very often in Notre Dame.
Well, and
Notre Dame players, let me finish real quick.
Yeah.
The Notre Dame players have now publicly said this multiple times, how difficult it is to play as a freshman in Notre Dame. Joe Wilkins talked about it last year. We heard from Connor Raddick. We've heard them make multiple comments about how hard it is to get on the field as a freshman at Notre Dame. That's not the case everywhere.
Right.
That's a fact. It may be right, may be wrong, but it's a fact. So that's going to be a thing, is you're going to need to bring him along, because if you just think Braden Lindsay is going to magically be healthy all year, you're making a mistake. Now, that doesn't mean Braden can't be healthy all year, but it means you can't start planning for him to go down after he goes down.
Yeah.
If you look at his injury history, you have to plan for it now. That's called preparation. Hey, look, we got to really make sure Xavier Watson and Lorenzo Styles are ready to go. Be a dynamic 1-2 punch at X if Braden goes down. We need to be ready for that. And if you're not preparing for that now, then you're making a mistake as a coach. And when the whole, he goes down, and so your offense is all of a sudden not the same because he's gone, that's on you. That's on you, because you have the players there. They're younger, they're less experienced, but they're there. It's on you to get them ready to play. And that's, so again, that's going to be a key. When you have the kind of injury history that some of these guys have, you're going to need to make sure that you're not waiting until those guys go down again before you get those other players ready.
Yes.
And that's going to be the very intriguing part of this.
And that's what we haven't seen, just to kind of build on your point, is, the next in line behind Braden Lindsay to take the top off the defense, et cetera, is Colsey, but he's a freshman. And Notre Dame has shown us in the past that they're not necessarily going to replace skill with like skill. They're going to replace an injury with another veteran, whether they can, repeat what that guy was doing. Does that make sense? Like they're willing to put a veteran in there that doesn't necessarily have the same skill set, as opposed to the next guy that has the same skill set and is less experienced. And I think that's the point that you're trying to make, is that we haven't seen that. And if something happens to Braden Lindsay, and we know he's a little fragile, right? I mean, I don't think I'm speaking out of turn when I say that. If he goes down for a game or two or more, God forbid, that is Colsey then the heir apparent? Is he the guy that they're going to stick in that spot? That I'm not convinced about. I am not convinced that that's going to happen. And
which spot is that? Are you referring to?
What, at the X, at the field side, right?
Yeah, and I don't see Colsey being that guy. I think it'd have to be Styles or Watts or Keys. I think it'd have to be that kind of combination of guys. I don't think Dion has I don't think his game is ideally suited for that. I'll say this, Vince, if it comes down to where Dion's just the next guy, he's like he's got to play, and there's an injury over there, I could see them moving Kevin Austin to X and Dion playing some W with Wilkins and Watts. That would be my thing. I could see something like that. And that's another part of this, is it just depends on who steps up as that next level guy.
Sure.
It could be a situation where, if Deion Colsey's ahead of Xavier Watts and ahead of Lorenzo Styles and ahead of those guys, you could always move Kevin, because as you said at the very beginning of this, when we're talking about Kevin can play everywhere.
Yes, absolutely.
Again, in theory, based on his skill set. Again,
sure.
we haven't seen him do it, but in theory, with his skill set, he can.
Right.
And so that's kind of when I look at it, Vince, is going to be a key. But it just kind of goes down the line. This guy performs well, and it impacts this guy. Then it impacts these guys. Xavier Watts, what's his role going to be? So I think when you look at this group, as we say, what can the potential of this group be, Vince? I think it has the potential to be a very diverse, explosive, volume-oriented group of receivers. If it plays, because you have some volume receivers and Kevin Austin, who can be a volume pass catcher. I think Joe Wilkins can be a volume pass catcher in a move the chains type of role.
Sure, absolutely.
He can do that.
There's a role for him.
Right. He can catch 6-7 balls in the game, and it's going to go for 80, 75, 80 yards, and he moves the chains. Not really dynamic, not really, winning the game for you with that dynamic play, but it's an important part of it. Avery Davis can be a volume pass catcher, in my opinion. Lawrence Keys can be a bit of a unique volume pass catcher. Then you have your big play guys. I think Lawrence Keys fits into that. Austin also fits into that. Lindsay fits into that. I think Xavier Watts fits into that. Lorenzo Styles fits into that. You have some size versatility there. You have some skill set versatility there. You have some positional versatility there. This is a group that has some unique skills, Vince. It's just about, the questions are going to be, number one, are the players healthy? Did they put into work this offseason? I don't doubt that they did. The next part of the question is, can this group play to their potential? Which, again, we don't know the answer to that. And then the third part of it, which to me might be as big of a question mark as the health, is will the offensive staff do two things? Number one, build around the skill set of these players schematically, I mean RPOs, screens, quick game. And then two, will Coach Alexander do something he has not done in 4 years, which is get the entire depth chart ready to play.
Right.
As opposed to just 3 or 4 guys. that's going to be the key to this. That all that ties into it. And if all those things happen, I think this honestly, there's going to be I'm going to lose some people with this comment right here. I think if that happens, this group has a chance to be one of the five to seven best receiving corps in the entire country. I truly believe that.
Top to bottom.
Now, there's a lot of ifs, right? There's a lot of ifs.
Sure.
Not just top to bottom, but production-wise.
Oh, okay.
Impact-wise. They'll never be top 5 to 7 just from a pure production standpoint because Notre Dame doesn't throw like that. I mean, there's always going to be Oklahoma.
Yeah,
right. Oklahoma's always going to USC is going to have a ton more volume production just because of the type of offense. Washington State, Mississippi State, pick an air raid offense, and they're going to produce more than Notre Dame's receivers are. Just by name, I'm talking about production from a maximizing the production potential of your offense, and then also the big play production, meaning big moment production, and then also impact. You could have 280 passing yards in Notre Dame's offensive system, and depending on how it goes, it's going to impact a defense and how a defense has to react to it, like an air raid offense going out there and throwing for 450.
Yeah,
it's just because it's a different type of offense. So if a quarterback goes 15 of 19 for 280 yards, that's going to impact you in a big way, as opposed to a quarterback that goes 45 of 67 for 450 yards, right? And so that's what I'm referring to there. I think this group has a chance to be one of the 5 to 7 best receiving corps in the country. And I'm just talking receivers. I'm not even talking tight ends. Now, they have a long way to go to get there. There's a lot of question marks to get there, but I think they can be that. And if they're that, now we'll dive into what this impacts the entire team. Jack Cohn's a guy, Vince, that you and I are high on.
Sure.
But Jack Cohn is not the kind of quarterback that can put a team on his shoulders the way that Trevor Lawrence can, the way that Justin Fields could at times, the way that the elite quarterbacks can. He doesn't have the running ability, the huge arm. He's not going to do to Ohio State in the playoff what Trevor Lawrence did to them 2 years ago. Right. He can, to me, the thing I love about Jack Cohn is I think he can run this offense at an incredibly high rate. And I think scheme-wise it's important, but he's a guy that needs the playmakers to do their job well. I'm going to get you the ball. You got to go do something with it. I'm not going to run around and make 18 people miss and launch a ball 75 yards down the field. I'm not doing that. But I'm going to make the read. I'm going to get it to you on time. I'm going to get it to you accurately, run your route correctly, run it at the right depth, make a guy miss, go do something with it, right? And so they need to play at their best for Jack Cohn to play at his best. Right, that's a part of it because
he's going to play within the offense. I mean that's what Jack Cohn gives you. Is he gives you that point guard mentality as a signal caller, right? I mean, he's going to go through the progressions. He is going to read everything through, and he's going to find the open man. And if you're doing your job, if you are running the routes at the right depth, if you are doing what you're supposed to do, then you're going to get the ball. I mean, if the play is meant to go to you, you're going to get it. I mean, if it works out that way in progression, then that's what's going to happen. I just feel like Jack Cohn, like you said, to reach his potential, he needs help. And I'm okay with that. I really am.
And again, for anyone that's thinking we're saying something, so did Mac Jones.
That was going to be my exact analogy was Mac Jones. Because, he's the perfect point guard for that offense. He was. He knew he had dudes around him. Those dudes did what they needed to do, and he got the ball in their hands. Now, did he take some chances? Did he fit it into some tight windows? Did he stretch the field? Did he do all those things? Yeah, he did. But it was all within the confines of the offense, right? He wasn't getting out of the pocket and making crazy plays with his legs and like juking guys and throwing off balance. And no, he was within the pocket, going through his progressions, making throws on time, doing what he needed to do to get the ball to the guys that can do all of those other things, right? And I feel like Jack Cohn is that kind of a quarterback. I mean, he's going to get those guys the ball. He's going to distribute. He's going to allow those guys to make plays. It's up to those guys to make the plays. And that's what we're talking about. That's why this offense and this wide receiving core is so important to the production and the explosiveness of this offense. Because they have the potential, they have the ability to take short plays, turn them into long plays, to take a slant route, make two guys miss, gone. Like they have the ability to do all of those things. and you add in a Kevin Austin, which this offense hasn't really had because Kevin Austin's been hurt, right? I'm talking about him specifically, not necessarily, but his skill set. He's going to high point a ball. He's going to go up and he's going to battle. He's going to body some guy. He's going to do something, he's going to do that. And then you've got the guys that are going to take the top off. And you've got guys that are going to be great in the middle of the field. And then, potentially the best tight end in the country, taking their,
Well, and I would say definitely one of the 2 or 3 best tight end group. And that's the thing is when we talk about here, and here's where, you get down to events. Here's another reason you just hit on it. You just made something click in my head. It was a great point. We're going to talk about the running backs next, how the receiving core impacts the running backs, and we'll be brief with it. And essentially, it takes pressure off of them, right? The better you are on the outside, the harder it is for you to condense your defense and play the running backs in the run game. It does the same thing with the offensive line. It protects the offensive line. We'll dive into that a little bit too. But with the running back specifically, the better you are at receiver, the harder it is for you to pay attention to Kyren Williams out of the backfield or Tyree out of the backfield. And then, of course, when they line up. But I'm just talking about out of the backfield. If you can develop a comprehensive passing attack to your running backs out of the backfield, so where you don't even have to – you're going to line them up in the slot and outside. But if you can be dangerous with your backs out of the backfield, it makes your offense so much better.
Oh, yeah.
Because if you actually go back and watch LSU in 2019, Clyde Edwards-Helaire would go out of the backfield at times, but a lot of the stuff he caught was out of the backfield. It wasn't lined up outside. If you can do that, because then you're running things off and then you're hitting the arrow routes, you're hitting the under routes, you're hitting the check downs where he's now got space to move. And I like Chris Tyree and Kyren Williams in space. And we saw a little minor example in the game, in the blue gold game. One was to Chris Tyree, just ran a little pivot route, cleared the defense out, hit him on a little pivot route, and he gains 18 yards, about as easy of an 18-yard pass play you're going to have.
So easy.
Then there was another play where they're running, the defense brings a blitz. It's in I think it was Jack Cohn. Well, just quickly dumps the ball off to Kyren Williams, who outruns Bo Bauer to the sideline for a first down. That stuff, it's like you're going to see that stuff all the time. And then if the running back or the linebacker gets out quick enough to get to Kyren's got to be able to then make a miss and go make a play. So, if the receivers aren't scaring teams, if the receivers aren't forcing defenses to worry about them, then the linebackers can do more to peak on the backers. Because, hey, look, our corners are locking down. Their receivers can't get off the line of scrimmage. We're taking care of them with the corners and safeties. We're going to handle the rest of these guys as linebackers, and it makes them less effective. But here's the point that I wanted to get into, Vince. First of all, Truman, my man, Truman DeMel, with the huge super sticker. Truman, thank you very, very much for that. I really, really appreciate that, man. Very, very much.
That's awesome.
So I wanted to get you in there before we moved on, but because that's big time right there, Truman. We truly appreciate it.
Yeah, it is.
So you get back to the thing about the receivers and the running backs. Running backs, I look, this isn't just Brian Driscoll and Vince D'Addario. No, we've admitted we grew up Notre Dame fans. I'm not afraid to admit that. And so it's not just us saying, hey, the running backs are one of the 5 best running back tandems in the country. We're saying that, but that's also, there's magazines that'll tell you the same thing, right?
Right.
The Jack Cohn is, we talked about him, but the tight end group, does anyone want to argue that the tight end group isn't one of the 5 to 7 best tight end groups in the country?
I think you're being generous as far as
I'm trying to be.
Yeah,
I'm trying to be. Yeah. And so I'm trying to make the point of, and then we talked about how the receiving core can be one of the top 5 to 7. So they all play off each other, right? Sure. But the groups that we know are going to be good, or we can say confidently the running backs are going to be good because they were good last year and everybody's back.
Returning
and they got 2 new guys, right?
Right.
And then you look at the tight ends. Yes, you lost Brock Wright, Tommy Tremble, but you return your best tight end, who's had the best freshman year of my lifetime for a Notre Dame freshman tight end. And then you've got a guy like George Takis. So I think when you look at it, there has been a lot of production that's coming back from that group. George Takis has not played a lot, but when he's played, he's produced.
Right.
Right. And so we've seen that's a position that's proven that they're just going to recycle tight ends in there every year, and there's going to be production.
Right. Absolutely.
So now this is why the receiving core is so important, because if they don't scare people, if they're a top 25 to 30, and I think Phil Steele had them like really low. I'm going to pull up the old Phil Steele. My buddy loves Phil Steele's book. I think it's a little too much for me. Even me, someone who is wordy and, prolonged, the king of making short stories long. It's even long for me. But I've got to find where he had the receiving core. It was not high. Needless to say, it was not high. And his group of receivers, he has Notre Dame. Are they even on the list? 33rd. Which, based on the past production, which is what he goes off of, I can't argue with that.
Well, yeah,
right?
Because there is no past production.
Right.
I mean, you've got Avery Davis, you've got Lawrence Keys, and you've got Braden Lindsay, who have played in games, right? And you've got Kevin Austin, who played as a freshman. But, I mean, he played as a freshman. I'll leave it at that. He was not an integral part of the offense by any stretch of the imagination. And we haven't seen him the last 2 seasons, really. And so, based on past production, and if you don't dive into what this team is, and if you don't know the talent level of the wide receivers that are in that room, and you're just going off of what's on paper, then 33, okay. I get it. Yeah, absolutely. I get it.
Yeah.
But it's so much more than that. It's so much more. There's so much more depth to this wide receiver room than what's on paper. But that's why this is a huge question mark, though, because it's not proven production. It's Brian and Vince and people who follow this team. Oh, yeah, there's some dudes in there.
Right.
But they still have to produce. They still have to put it on the field.
Right. And a question that Truman, I wanted to put, he had a couple questions. We'll get to some others later, but I wanted to get to this one after he left a super sticker because it fits into what we're talking about. You know, he asked, how much better will Michael Mayer be this year? And to me, a big part of that is going to be how good are the receivers. Yeah. Like, tell me how good the receivers are, then I'll tell you how much better Michael Mayer is going to get. Because, again, if Michael Mayer's not getting the production look, and I'll say, let me interrupt real quick. I'll deal with that later. Sorry. If Michael Mayer isn't getting protected by the receivers, then he's not going to be the guy we think he can be.
Well, because they're going to be able to double and triple team him. I mean, right? I mean, that's what you're getting at, right? I mean, it's a matter of they're going to be able to be all over him, and because the corners can one-on-one the receivers, and it's no big deal, right? So Michael Mayer is not going to be who we think he's going to be because defenses are going to be able to key on him.
Right. And there's just not going to be the room to work. Right. That's the thing is, and this is what happened last year. And I point to Kyron Williams, and this is where you say, well, what evidence you have that the receivers playing well is going to impact? Okay, so I'll point this out again. Does anyone in this room not think Kyron Williams is really good? Right. Is there anyone in this chat that thinks Tony Jones is better than Kyron Williams? Is there anyone in this chat that thinks that the 2019 offensive line was better than the 2020 offensive line? Does anyone believe that? I'm going to go out on a limb and say no one believes any of those things.
Right.
But what we do know is that Tony Jones averaged 5.9 yards per carry and Kyron Williams averaged 5.3 yards per carry. Right? In football numbers, that's a huge difference.
Yeah.
Okay? Huge difference. And when you're talking anything over a half a yard is a big jump in production. So if we all believe that Kyron's better than Tony, if we all believe that the 2020 offensive line was better than 2019 offensive line, then why was there the big jump? Well, the big jump was because in 2019 you had to worry about Chase Claypool and Braden Lindsay and Cole Kmet in the pass game, which meant, okay, Tony Jones was the least of your concerns at running back.
Right.
And now Tony had some big games. I mean, they don't beat USC without Tony Jones Jr., right? He went off against Virginia. The point being is that that Chase Claypool and Cole Kmet balling out made Tony Jones better because then you couldn't stuff the box. Whereas last year, Vince, we've showed pictures of this where you're putting like 9 guys in the box, like 8 guys, 9 guys in the box consistently. And so Kyron's making dudes miss just to get 3-4 yards.
Yeah, exactly.
Sometimes.
Yep.
So
because he was running in loaded boxes an awful lot.
Constantly.
Because look, and we've talked about this before, when you're a defensive coordinator, you've got to look at, okay, what do I need to stop in order to be successful, right? And you named off all those guys that were on the same team as Tony Jones, and that it is what it is, right? I mean, he's going to be lower on the list of guys. You're like, well, we just can't really focus on him. We've got to kind of take care of these other guys. I mean, that's just what you do. Well, last year, people are like, hey, Ian Book's not going to beat us with his arm. So we're going to load the box. And we're going to not let him run on us. We're not going to let Kyron Williams run on us. We're not going to let the offensive line, which was arguably, I'll just say arguably, the best part of this offense, we're not going to let them beat us, right? And so it was a lot harder for the running backs. It was a lot harder for Kyron Williams because he was running into loaded boxes all the time. And it wasn't necessarily to stop Kyron Williams. It was to minimize the effect that the offensive line had and the lack of fear of the quarterback position.
And receiver.
Yeah.
And receiver. I mean, look, Javon McKinley was a good player last year. Nobody was like, oh, my God, we got to make sure Javon McKinley doesn't beat us.
Right.
Number one, because of the way the offense was run. But number two, because of Javon wasn't that kind of guy. He was good. Right. Don't get me wrong. He was good, but he wasn't Chase Claypool. He wasn't Will Fuller. He wasn't.
There was no threat of opening up the defense. Right. I mean, like taking the top off the offense either. Like there was no.
And part of that was the quarterback. To your point,
right?
Yeah, it was. I mean, so you look at it and you say, boy, if you could get that kind of production in the passing game, if you can get back to that, if you can get back to being an explosive downhill group, if you can get back to being, boy, if you want to play one-on-one on the outside, Kevin Austin's going to catch 10 balls today. He's going to catch a couple deep balls. Right. We're going to hit about 4 back shoulders and out cuts on the sidelines. We're going to eat you up, right? I mean, if you want to load the box up, that's fine. Braden Lindsay we're going to take about 4 or 5 shots to Braden Lindsay and Lorenzo Styles and Lawrence Keys, right? We're going to get you in some ISOs that you're not going to like. But if you're not getting that production on the outside, I mean, last year was basically like, I dare you to beat us throwing the football.
Right.
I mean, that's what Clemson did in the second game, in the title game. That's what Alabama did. That's what Louisville did. That's what a lot of teams did. And Notre Dame was still good enough to beat most of those teams just by running it and not being a great throwing the ball team.
Yeah.
But then when you look at some of the games where Ian Book did step up and make some of those big plays, like he made some big downfield plays against North Carolina, and that kept them in the game early and helped them win that game convincingly. He was very aggressive against Boston College and tore them apart. He, early in the game against Clemson, he was aggressive, took some shots, and they were eating Clemson up early. Then he stopped doing that. They didn't score. And then when they had late in the game, when the game was on the line, what did he do? He opened it up again. Right. But Clemson was basically going to say, I dare you to beat us with Ian Book. First time they could, second time they couldn't.
Right.
And the first time they could, they got help from 10 points that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah generated, but didn't do it enough, and that's why they weren't good enough. And there were times in 2019 where teams were that way. Like, we dare you to beat us with throwing to somebody other than Chase Claypool. I dare you. And he couldn't do it. So we saw that at times in 2017. So this isn't just an Ian Book thing. There were times in 2017 where teams were like, hey, we're not going to let you throw on us or run on us. Now, it didn't matter more often than not because they were so good in 2017. But more often than not, you're not going to be that good against the better teams in the schedule. And we saw that. Saw it against Georgia. We saw it against Miami. Georgia and Miami both said, I dare you to throw the ball downfield on us. I dare you. We want you to.
Right. Exactly.
And they couldn't do it. They missed those chances against Georgia. Sometimes it was the quarterback's fault. Sometimes it was the receiver's fault. I still say if Freddie Canteen even remotely knows how to play a deep ball against Georgia, he catches a ball for 60 yards. If Equanimous St. Brown would have played with any kind of guts whatsoever that game, he would have made some plays. If Chris Fink had chances to drop some big balls, but that was the whole point. You were going to make them – you were going to say, hey, look, we're not going to let Quentin Nelson and Mike McGlinchey and Josh Adams and Brandon Wimbush with his legs beat us. You're going to have to beat us with Equanimous St. Brown, Freddie Canteen, and Cameron Smith. Sorry, you just are. And they couldn't do it, right? Miami did the same thing. You're going to have to beat us with Brandon Wimbush throwing the football. You're not going to run on us. And they couldn't.
Right.
And that's what kept that team from winning. So now you look at it and say, if the receiving core can step up, play to its potential, and force defenses to game plan for them. Right. And then when those teams say, hey, look, you're not going to run it on us. Sorry. Say, fine. We'll just go throw it for 400 yards. Or we'll beat you for 350 and on 20 completions, right?
Yes.
I mean, that they've got to make those teams pay. And that to me is where this group has to be. That's the difference between this group being good and this team being capable of beating the better teams in the schedule. That's the difference. It's that group right there. It's not the line, because we've seen Notre Dame go 12-0 with a mediocre offensive line. In 2018 and 2019, with the exception of about 3 games, sort of early, if you remember, Vince, it started with the Vanderbilt game, and then because the O-line actually played well against Vanderbilt. They missed a lot of opportunities in the pass game. And then against Wake Forest, they were brilliant. And then against Stanford, they dominated. Those 3 games, they were starting to finally hit their groove. Alex Bars was playing at a very high level, and then he goes down.
He got hurt.
And then they were not the same line the rest of the year. And then they were pretty mediocre, if not below average, in 2019 for much of the year. And yet that team still went, 22-2 in the regular season? So the line is important, but you can protect a mediocre line with great skill players. And if you don't believe me, go watch any game that Clemson has played in the last 6 years. Pick a game, and I guarantee to be a game where it's not great O-line play, but a great offense.
Right, because their O-line's average at best.
Right. Some years it's been good.
Above average. Above average is okay.
And they're above average just because they're experienced.
Right.
That's it.
Right.
It's not.
They're not elite. They're not elite.
No.
By any
never been close to that.
Yeah.
They've never finished as one of. I don't believe they've ever finished as a Joe Moore Award finalist.
I never hear them in the conversation. It's always Alabama, Notre Dame. Who else has been in there?
Oklahoma, Iowa,
Georgia,
Ohio State.
Iowa. Yeah,
right.
Iowa. Yep.
So, they've got 2 rings. And it's because they've had great skill players, and they scheme to protect their line. They don't ask their line to carry the day for them.
Sure.
And that's the difference. So Notre Dame doesn't have to ask the offensive line to carry the day for them right now. Now, if they can do both, that's phenomenal.
Great.
But they can't blame the offensive line for this offense not scoring points this year.
Agreed.
Maybe it could become an issue when we get into the postseason.
Mm-hmm.
That's when it could become an issue. But in the regular season, there's not a team on the schedule that they can't beat if the offensive line just does okay.
And I will say that once you get to the end of the season, if this line is healthy, whatever the makeup of the line is, and that's a whole other conversation. But whatever the makeup of this line is, if they've got 12 games under their belt going into the postseason, I like their chances of being an above average to semi-elite in that neighborhood. You know what I mean? Like, I really feel like if they've got 12 games together, even if it's a rotation at guard, if we think that Rocco Spindler is going to rotate with Zeke Correll, you had me saying Zeke Mata from earlier. Even if there's a rotation there, you got 6 guys. Because remember, they won the Joe Moore Award when they had a rotation at right tackle, right? So even if it's a rotation, I'm okay with that. But if they're all together, playing together for 12 games, I still think that the offensive line will be just fine. You know what I mean? And especially if they're undefeated at that point, because now they know what it feels like to win, and they understand what their role is like in winning. And I don't know. I guess I'm giving too much credit. But these guys they're good players. They just don't have the production yet. They don't have the time playing together, things of that nature. So I do feel like if they stay healthy the whole year, we may be, speaking of them in a better light come the end of the year.
Perhaps, but my point with this conversation is they don't have to be lights out.
For sure.
That's the point. Sure. Just don't as long as you can. Here's what makes Clemson's line work, even though and when we say it's not a great offensive line, we're talking talent. We're not talking production, because they produce pretty well. But the reason they produce very well is they're schemed well, and they execute at a high level. They don't dominate, but they just do their job. It's 5 guys doing their job. Part of the reason Clemson struggled last year is because they had a lot of, to be honest with you, higher ranked guys that weren't executing at the same level. Some of their 3 stars and players of the past that weren't great players, but were just very fundamentally and technically and assignment sound.
Yeah.
That's it.
They didn't dominate.
And that works.
But yeah.
Right.
It works when you've got Travis Etienne behind you, and you've got
but it worked.
Guys that can make
it
plays.
Worked when they had but that's the whole point. You have Etienne. They won a championship with Wayne Gallman at running back. He wasn't as good as Travis Etienne, but I think he was like a 4th round pick of the Giants. They had who was that quarterback they had was pretty decent that year? Deshaun Watson, right?
Yeah, he was better than average.
He was pretty decent. But you had Mike Williams, you had Ray McLeod, you had Deion Kane before he got hurt. They had another guy whose name escapes me. He was not Hunter Renfro, but another guy that was like average like 9 yards a catch. But he was like a real good player, but he's like average like 9 yards a catch. But He just was get the screens out and, catch it and run for 7 yards on a quick throw. That's a very efficient play, and so I'm saying is like it wasn't sexy, but like it got the job done. And then, of course, recently you had T. Higgins, Justin Ross. Last year you had you had Amari Rodgers, you had Cornell Powell, you had Travis Etienne. I mean, so you've had these really good schemes and these perimeter players that could go make plays. And, of course, you had a trigger man. But I don't think Clemson's receivers were great last year. As a group, they were okay.
Sure.
You had a couple. We had one really good. Amari Rodgers was really good. Cornell Powell was a good player, more of a system guy. After that, it was kind of okay. I think Notre Dame's receiving corps can certainly be better than that. But it's going to require this guy to stay healthy. So, again, I go back to we've seen examples of teams winning championships without great offensive lines. And the reason for that is because the linemen are assignment correct and all that, which is all that this line needs to be. Just don't be soft and just do your job.
Right. Fire off the ball. Be how do I want to say this? Be sound in what you're doing.
Just aggressively do your job.
Aggressively. Yes.
Aggressively do your job.
That's a good. I like that. We're going to write that down. Aggressively do your job. Absolutely. Yep. I like that.
So they don't need anyone to be Liam Eichenberg. They don't need anyone to be Aaron Banks. They don't need anyone to be Quentin Nelson or Alex Bars or Mike McGlinchey. Or just aggressively do your job because there's enough perimeter talent. But here's the key, though, Vince. We'll tie it back to the original conversation. If the receivers don't play to their potential, then now the line does have to play beyond just do your job, right? They do. Absolutely. They have to carry the team.
Absolutely.
Like they did last year, like they did in 2017, like they did in other years, right? And that's going to be the key is those two groups have to play well. Yep. We have a couple super chats here that I want to get to that are about this. Lucas Chapman, by the way, first of all, thank you for the super chat, Lucas, very much. If Reese makes an effort to extend the run game this season, wouldn't that help elevate receiver play and negate some O-line issues due to his inexperience? That's kind of what we're talking about, right? Is the system has to be in place. But look, here's the deal. I agree wholeheartedly on the O-line part. Yes. In college, more so than the NFL, you can protect a mediocre line. It's harder to do that in the NFL, but in college you can. But scheme is important, but the scheme is only going to go as far as the players can take it.
Sure.
I mean, that's the thing is I could have a great scheme, but if I don't have guys running routes at the right depths, if I don't have guys catching balls, I mean, at some point in time, guys just have to make plays because as good as I can scheme you, they're going to be in the right call sometimes defensively.
Right.
What do we do? Guys have to run their routes correctly, make tough catches. Quarterback's got to get the ball on time. So, you have to have receivers make those plays. I think it's the other way around. I think that it's both. You can have a great scheme can elevate receivers, and a bad scheme can keep receivers down. At the same time, you got to have the right receivers to then elevate the scheme. Right. So if those two things are both working together, like Oklahoma is not explosive offensively just because Lincoln Riley's a genius.
Right.
Lincoln Riley's a genius who has really good players to work with. Right. The same thing with Ryan Day at Ohio State. Same thing with Steve Sarkisian. It wasn't Steve Sarkisian's an idiot and these players are so great that they're scoring out anyway. Right. It's he's a genius and they're great and they execute at a high level. It's got to be both to really compete for championship. And that's ultimately what the standard is now, So that to me is yes, the scheme is a part of it. But, when you look at make an effort to extend the run game this season, that's the part that I'm not quite sure, Lucas, what you're referring to there. So like the other parts about the scheme and all that.
Run outside?
But that's what they did last year, right? So I'm not quite. So, Lucas, if you don't mind following up just kind of what you mean by that part. But, I kind of touched on how scheme can matter and all that. But the receivers have to elevate the scheme to a degree. Now, specifically to that part, if you could elaborate, I'd appreciate that because I do want to understand. I don't want to speak against or for something if that's not ultimately what you were saying. John Klimek has a question for you, Vince. And, John, thank you for the super chat also.
Man. Thanks, John.
And Vince, he said, Vince, you said not rotating in or subbing a couple times. I think this is more important than we discussed. It's needed for development. Look at our D line, for example. Yeah.
Well, and we've talked about that too. It's a little bit different defensive line versus offensive line just because of the manner in which you have to communicate and work with the guy next to you. So it's a little bit different defensive line to offensive line. But if a guy's battling and he's good enough to be on the field, then I'm okay with a rotation. Just like I said, just like they did at right tackle a few years ago, is because they were good. Robert Hainsey was good enough to get on the field as a true freshman.
And there was a plan in place.
And there was a plan, and there you go. There was a plan in place, and it was defined.
They stuck to it no matter what. And even when Hainsey would go in 2 minutes, even though he had just played the previous years, there was a couple times Hainsey actually went back to back. That was still part of the plan because they knew when it was 2 minutes, he was going to go in a right tackle. Right. But I think also, and I don't know if John's talking about O-line or receiver here, so we'll talk about both. It's especially important in receiver. And we've seen in past years, somebody had asked a question during the show, and I want to try to find it. It was a comment about how going to 11 personnel naturally kind of influences how many guys you play. I do want to find this because it was a question that I wanted to address that doesn't necessarily mean that. If I can find it here. Just give me. Oh, here we go. It was from Omar Austin. It says, if Reese opens up the offense and goes 3 receivers a lot, will that not expose Dell if he can't get more than 3 to 4 guys ready with subs and possible injuries? It should be glaring as if 4, 5, and 6 aren't ready. You'd think so, but it's only if guys get hurt. Because, in 2018, Notre Dame's offense, when they put Ian Book in the lineup, was as good as it's been over the – there's been 3 stretches where the offense is really good. One of them doesn't matter a whole lot to me. One was during Brandon Wimbush's, from the BC game until the Wake Forest game was the best stretch of Notre Dame offense we've seen. The offense, when Ian Book got inserted in the lineup, was probably the best consecutive stretch of good football we've seen. Now, the 2015 offense was really good overall, but they were kind of just all year just up and down. They were a big play unit,
but not the most efficient
unit. Yeah. Right. Yeah. But you look at this 2019 group was also really good in the last 5 games, but to me, that was more of a byproduct, just having way better players than everybody else that they played. That was a really stretch of really bad opponents after the Virginia Tech game. But you look at that 2018 offense, they were 11 personnel a lot. And Miles Boykin and Chase Claypool both played about 90 to 91% of the receiver snaps available there.
So if they're not going to take them off the field, then you can't be exposed. That's the issue that we've had all along.
But what would have happened if one of those guys would have got hurt? They'd have been in trouble.
Sure.
They'd have been in trouble.
Yes.
And we saw this in 2019 at the beginning of the year when Michael Young got hurt and then Braden Lindsay was hurt. And, they got Lawrence Keys in there and Lawrence did some nice things, but like Chris Fink was struggling. They didn't have any other answers.
Right.
They didn't have anything else they could turn to. Now, part of that was you had injuries. You had, Kevin Austin was suspended and all these other types of things. But at the end of the day, it's like, that lack of development from previous seasons hurt you.
Right. That's why you need to develop your entire depth chart.
Yeah. So it's only true, Omar. Your question is legitimate, but it's only true if there are injuries.
Right.
And in 2018, for example, they played a lot of 11 personnel. Those guys stayed healthy. So yeah, it would expose him if he's not able to get if there are injuries or if guys aren't producing. But hopefully he doesn't get exposed. Hopefully, look, he stepped it up on a recruiting trail recently, right?
Can't argue that.
And he's got to sit there and say, hey, look, it's up to me to get these guys ready. I can't have this incredibly strict standard. This isn't 1995 anymore, right? Where we're playing slow-paced offenses and all that. This is 2021. We're trying to win a title. That's how the mindset's got to have. I got to make sure that my best talent is ready to play. If that means it's 3 guys, it's 3 guys. If that's all you have. If I have 6, 7, 8, 9 guys, then I got to figure out 5 or 6 of them for sure, and then figure out ways to make sure that those 7, 8, 9 are also getting coached up in the right ways in case their number's called. That's what he has to do. He has to earn his money that way. He has to look in the mirror and say, what I was doing wasn't good enough. Right. He's got to make the change. Say, it's up to me, the grown-up, who's been coaching college football longer than these kids have been alive,
right,
to figure out how to get to them and reach them and get them ready to play, as opposed to them having to do all the work to get me to earn their trust.
That's great.
They got to earn my trust, but then it's up to me to make sure that I'm putting them in a position to be successful, that I'm putting in the work, that I'm making the time, that I'm doing this, I'm doing that. The whole thing that Connor Ragland's talking about. We have our meetings and we're out. No, enough of that. Okay. You got to stay there. You got to get those guys ready to play. That's your freaking job. And if you don't want to do that, that's cool. Go coach at a D3 school where you can be done by 6, 7 o'clock, right? Where you don't have to do all those kind of things, right? There's a lot of D3 coaches that go coach D3. I know some because they don't want to have to deal with the They want to be a dad. And this isn't an insult. This is something I had great respect for. Hey, you know what? Mike Donnelly, I've talked about before, was my head coach of Muhlenberg. He could have easily been a Division I coach, but he was a parent of a middle and a high school age kid at the time. And he's like, I wanted to, my main jobs was as a husband and as a dad. And then football came next. And so being at a D3 school allowed him to it's not the grind that it is at the Division I level.
Right.
But you chose to be here and you chose to get paid handsomely to be here.
Yeah.
It's your job to develop these kids and get them ready to play. It's not their job to win you over. It's your job to get them ready. And that's going to be an important piece to this, a very, very important piece to this, because this group can't play to its potential if Coach Alexander doesn't step up and do what he's capable of doing. And if he does that, then this is, in my opinion, is going to be a fun year. No question about it. It's going to be a fun year because the talent is there. And John kind of follows up, says, yes to the question. I don't care if receivers only know 3 routes to start with, 100%.
Yeah.
Then make sure look, if Lorenzo Styles only knows 5 routes, which is not much it's post, go, post, hitch, out, cross,
slant,
drag. Any freshman that I've ever coached could know all those by the end of fall camp.
No problem.
And I didn't even put a slant. I don't put post corner. I don't put post dig. Just
right.
Those,
no double
those
moves.
Routes.
Just simple.
I'm not talking comebacks, but just those 6 routes. If Lorenzo Styles can't learn those by the end of camp, and Deion Colsey, then you're not coaching them very well.
Right.
You're just not. And then say, okay, well, we're going to have him run 4 of those, and we're going to make sure he's darn good at those 4. That's what you do. And if you're not doing that, then that's a you problem, not a player problem.
Absolutely.
I don't care what anybody says. There's going to be downvotes from all the people that get in their feelings anytime you ever say anything other than Notre Dame is perfect. That's fine. I don't care.
Yeah. It's just nobody's perfect.
Yeah.
Right.
And it's just that. Well, it's also common sense, but but the fact is that's on you, not the players.
Yeah.
I get so tired of this whole, it's up to the players. So why is it the 18? You know what? Then let's pay players. Let's say coaches can't make more than $50,000 a year, and we're going to pay the players 6 figures since they have to do all the work. Since it's up to them to go out there and get to earn playing time and to do this and learn this all. Then what do we need coaches for? Right? Just get a couple babysitters to kind of tell them what time practice is, and then they can coach themselves up. No, coaches are a very important piece of this. And it's time for Coach Alexander to go out there and prove that he is the guy that I thought he was when they hired him. Because I was excited about this hire when they made it. I was. Now it's time for him to go prove it. And he stepped it up on the recruiting trail. Now it's time for him to make the necessary changes in the offseason. And I'm hoping that Coach Kelly had that change with him. Part of this is going to be about Coach Kelly and how he interacts with his coaches during practice. He's got to chill out with the whole ripping on his coaches thing, because with Coach Alexander, he doesn't handle that very well, right? And it causes him to kind of say, well, I'm not going to put a young guy out there in practice that's going to make a mistake and get my butt chewed out.
Right.
I'm going to put Joe Wilkins in there.
Because he knows what he's supposed to do. He's going to do it right. Yeah.
Right. And so, he's got to kind of man up a little bit and deal with that. That's how Brian Kelly coaches. But then also Brian Kelly can say, you know what, we don't need this in practice. We don't see this on defense, right? The defensive coaches, Clark Lee wasn't that way. Mark Schumer, where he's just going to undress somebody, no practice. Mm-hmm. Well, that's why the defense plays loose and plays fast, and it's been so much better.
Loose is a great word. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's where it needs to be. And those are some of those changes that Coach Kelly continue to make. And that doesn't mean you don't get on people and hold people to a high standard. And it doesn't mean you don't rip people from time to time, but there just needs to be sort of hey, let's find some common ground. And if you want to rip somebody, then bring them into the office later and we can have that conversation. Hey, look, man, it's not okay.
Well, and it goes without saying, you and I have talked about this a million times, and this is coaching 101 as a head coach, as a coaching staff. When you're on the field in front of the players, everybody's on the same page, period. And you can have a discussion about, hey, maybe a slant route would be better than a dig route here or something like that. But you guys are on the same page at all times.
I've had coaches that would rip assistants in practice.
That's terrible.
We knew beforehand. We knew what was going on. It was part of the plan.
Okay.
If they make a mistake, I'm getting on you because I want them to view you as their guy and say, we got to have Coach Driscoll's back
because he's getting ripped just like we do.
Coach.
Yeah,
but we knew that going in.
Yeah,
it was part of the conversation. It was part of who we were.
That's different. Yeah,
and so I knew to take it. But it was still the coach criticizing my group.
Sure.
It wasn't like, hey, today in practice, I'm gonna go off on you. It was just, hey, look, here's how we do it. If they're making mistakes, if they're not bringing it, I'm getting on you. I'm not going to rip them.
Yeah.
It's up to you to fix it. So I knew that going in. Right. And so we'd have those kind of things fired up, or we'd have those kind of things discussed, and we knew. And it was a way of making the players view us as, hey, if I got to do my job and coach them up, then they got to do their job and do what I coach them to do. And then that's how it's going to work. Otherwise, I'm going to get ripped, and then they're going to get ripped. So, but it was part of, we knew it kind of going in. And so
that makes sense. I get that.
And it was never to the degree that some of the things I've heard about what happens in Notre Dame. It was never like that. So anyway, that's the thing, ultimately kind of bringing it back to the receiver thing. But look, this is a deep, talented group.
It is.
It's a group that's I'm confident that Tyrese is going to scheme things up in a way that's going to allow them to be successful. I'm as confident as right now of that as I've been since he was hired.
Sure.
I really am. And and that's kind of what's fun about this time of the year, right? So we'll see if that's true or not. But
I can't wait.
I think the talent is there. I think the scheme will be there. Now it's about guys staying healthy, the position coach doing what I think he's capable of. There's no ifs anymore of talent. There's no ifs of, well, if this guy goes down, what do? You're okay. Especially if it's, Braden Lindsay, who's been more of the more injury-prone guy. Of Kevin Austin only had one injury, really, one significant injury at Notre Dame. That was the foot.
It just keeps it just happened more than once. That's
he missed 2019 for a different reason. It
correct.
Wasn't injury-related.
Yes, correct.
So if Braden Lindsay goes down, you're in a much better position to handle that now than you were last year or the year before. Because last year you didn't have Lorenzo Styles. Xavier Watts is only a freshman, and Jordan Johnson, as good as he is, he's not that kind of player. Now, that doesn't mean Jordan shouldn't have played more, but I'm talking about replacing Braden Lindsay's skill set. You didn't have anyone that could replace Braden Lindsay's skill set. You do now. You have a couple now, in my opinion, because also Lawrence Keys wasn't 100% healthy last year either after the first few games. So those are the things that, to me, that I'm kind of excited about with this group is the tools are there. Now it's about putting it all together.
Right. And the depth is there.
That's right.
To elaborate on what you were saying. And in order for this group to be elite and to be the group that we think it can be, they have to tap into that depth. They absolutely have to. They have to be too deep at every position, in my opinion. So that means your rotation is 6, right? And there's an argument to be made where depending on how the game is going and the flow of the game and things, I think you could go 7-8 and be just fine. And so, like I said, in order for this group to be elite, I think you have to tap into that depth. If they only go 3 deep and they prayed that they don't have an injury or whatever, then I don't think that they're using this group to the potential that they can be, right? That's my issue. Like, you have to be able to tap into that depth, and I think that is so key into what they're going to be.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, no question. So that's going to do it, Vince, for this podcast portion of our show. We're going to dive right into some questions and answers. We've got a super chat ready to go, but that's going to wrap it up for this receiver portion, Vince. Very, very important group. It's going to be a really intriguing next month of the season to see how this group develops, to see how they're utilized, and see if Coach Alexander can really take that next step and really lead this group. Because if this unit reaches its potential this year, this offense is going to be really, really exciting
and fun. Just so much fun to watch.
So let's dive into some questions. Vince,
nailed it. Yes,
you ready to go?
I'm ready. We got a super chat. Let's roll with that first.
Okay. Clayton Stoller, thank you so much for the super chat,
Man.
Clayton. I appreciate that very much. Clayton says, don't want to put words in your mouth at all, but you alluded to Notre Dame having to make some decisions if they can't get Billy Schrauth. Could you elaborate? I said Billy Routh and Zach Rice is what I commented yesterday. So what he's referring to is we were doing a show yesterday, and if you missed it, and we were talking about how if they don't get Schrauth or Rice, that Notre Dame's going to have some decisions to make. What I meant by that, Clayton, was who's the fourth lineman going to be? Okay, because you need a fourth lineman. You have to have a fourth lineman in this class. The decisions are you just going to try to push for Emil Wagner? That would be risky to me. Emil would be better as, like, you have room for a fifth because he's got a very questionable body. Can he get the weight? Can he get the size? Can he fill out and play like a 295 plus pound guy? That's a big question mark. There's a reason Ohio State went and got a 265 pound tackle from Colorado instead of the 255 pound kid from their home state.
I was going to say,
from a feeder school.
He's in the backyard of
right.
Ohio
Emil
State.
Wagner's a top 100 recruit, according to a couple people.
Right.
That's not the case with George Fitzpatrick.
The kid they got from Colorado.
Why'd they go out to Colorado to get him and pass on Emil Wagner? It should tell you something. So there's some risk there. If you take him as your fourth, there's a big, good ceiling, athletic player, tough and all that. But, can he play at the size that you need him to play? That's a big question mark. And so do you take him? If he doesn't pan out, your margin for error at tackle is very thin. Billy, if you miss out on Schrouth and Rice, you have to decide, is Wagner good enough? Do we need to take a fifth lineman? Do we need to now go find a guy? Do we try to flip a guy? Do we try to see if there's any late bloomers? Because this is going to be an interesting, and we've talked about this before, because of the COVID year, there's a lot of kids who didn't get noticed, a lot of kids who didn't have film, some kids in some states just didn't play football. Some played in the spring, but it was like 3 games. There's going to be some kids that kind of come out and have breakout seasons as seniors. Right now, Notre Dame was able to find one of those kids in Ashton Craig because he's from their home state.
He's from Indiana.
They need to see if there's a guy like that emerges in Virginia or California or Florida or Maryland or Pennsylvania, somewhere that's a little further away, to see if maybe that can be a guy. Because as you know, I don't care about rankings. Is there a Joe Alt out there somewhere, that can be that kind of guy? Is there another Ashton Craig? And then do you find that guy? That's the key. Or do you say, hey, we're going to try to flip somebody? That's a risky proposition because you haven't necessarily proven to have a coaching staff, an offensive line coach who's capable of doing that yet. So that's what I mean, Clayton. It's a very good question. What I mean by they have some decisions to make. Do they expand the board? Do they say, hey, look, we're not going to take – because here's another option. We're not going to take a fourth offensive lineman just to take one. Right. What we are going to scour the heck out of the grad transfer market next year for depth, right? Maybe it's not a guy that starts, but we're at least going to have to bring in some guys for depth. Maybe there's some guys that are transfers that you can look at and different things like that. So that's what I'm saying. And then to Troy's question, he says, any chance Notre Dame looks at Kenji Swanson at tackle? His parents are ND grads and he's committed to Stanford at tackle. That's part of that equation too, Troy. Right, that's the decisions you have to make, expanding your board, trying to flip somebody else, because you can't just go with 3 linemen. And I don't think just going for Emil Wagner is necessarily the answer. So that's what I meant by that. And I'll look into him, Troy, to see if there's any chance. I think right now their focus is on Schrouth and Rice. That's the focus right now.
I agree.
And then when it becomes obvious they're not going to get those guys, if it becomes obvious they're not going to get those guys, that's when those decisions have to make. However, I don't think it would be a bad idea to start looking now.
Yeah,
I think it would be smart to start looking now.
I agree.
In order to do that. So very good question. We got another super chat from Patrick Barnes. Thanks for another great podcast. Are y'all planning to have a post-game analysis right after games in the fall? Are you comfortable enough with where we are to dive into this now, Vince? I
think so. Yeah, I think we are. I think so. The plan is as we sit here today on August 9th, the plan is basically for home games anyway. It might be different for away games, right? So for home game situations, I'll obviously be on campus, and so I need to get off campus to come home, and so we can actually do a legit show. We tossed around an idea of trying to do like a short show, like right after the game gets over from the press box. There's all
that
kinds
was
of
negated when we realized I won't be at game. Well, I won't be in the press box games this year. I'm gonna still be at as many games as possible, but I'm buying a ticket.
Right.
Hopefully friends of mine have tickets available.
Right.
So we won't do it then. So we'll be doing it. Yeah, and ultimately part of it too was Vince and I really talked about this yesterday, was we would rather wait an extra half an hour to get home to where we can then just do the show as long as the show needs to happen. Right. And to quickly get a show done that we have to stop in 30 minutes because we can't use the room anymore.
Correct. So the plan will be, and this is approximate, but the game gets over. I would say an hour after the game is over, we should be going live. And
right.
We're going to have to work out the kinks. We'll have to see. Maybe it'll be quicker than that, depending on how long it takes to get home. If there's no traffic, I can be home in 15, 20 minutes. You know what I mean? It just depends on
how quickly he can get out
exactly.
to the. And the nice thing is too is just to give you guys a heads up on some things we're working on. I recently hired a Notre Dame student who's going to help us with some coverage this year. We are in the process of trying to hire a beat writer that's going to come. And now we've got a guy in mind, but we're still looking. So if there's anybody out there that has experience as a beat writer, I want someone that's experienced, someone who can just kind of take control of it. If there's somebody that's got some experience doing that, let me know. I also have someone in mind, but who knows if that's going to work out or not. So we are looking to do that. And then that's going to free up Vince to kind of do just more X's and O's. And then obviously to be able to get out of there and not have to worry about the press conferences and all that. We'll have people to handle those kind of things. So those are going to be parts of what our plan is this year for post game. Now, again, the specific time of it we'll have to find out. We'll have to see how that goes. But we definitely are going to do a post game show right after games, even for road games, even if I'm on the road, those type of things. So that is our plan. Certainly our plan. So let's get back into some more questions. Truman had a question here, and he said, how realistic are we on Anthony Lucas committing Notre Dame? And then earlier, Truman had a question about could CJ Williams, how can CJ Williams help get Anthony Lucas? Somebody questioned how that could be. And I actually think that helps because here's the deal. When you start going out into a region to recruit players, top players, then other top players from that region are going to take notice. Notre Dame just landed, in my opinion, are the two of the three best West Coast pass catchers in the entire West Coast, in Tobias Merriweather and CJ Williams. Notre Dame's had success recruiting out in California. There's been a lot of success recruiting in that region recently that allows them to say, hey, look, we're coming to your area. Look what we're doing. Come be a part of it. So, and a lot of them are looking at similar schools. Okay, hey, I was looking at USC. You're looking at USC. What are your thoughts there? Hey, why didn't you look more at Texas or Texas A&M? Why was Notre Dame your pick? These kids know each other. They talk. So, yes, I do think it can help. Right now, I think Anthony Lucas is pretty wide open. I think if, there's been times when Miami's been considered the leader, times when Bama's been considered the leader, times when A&M's been considered the leader, and times when Notre Dame's been considered the leader. I think they're in the battle. I think he's going to make visits in the fall. He needs to see a good product on the field. Notre Dame has to keep recruiting him hard, and they have to give him reason to come. He's a very interesting kid. He's a kid that does value the academic piece. His family definitely values the academic piece, but at the same time, he's also an elite football player that you need to convince him that he can come be an elite football player, play for championships, be a high pick. I mean, Miami just put 2 first defensive ends in the first round of the NFL draft. They can sell that to him. It's also a very good school. Now, we can argue whether or not football players get the opportunity to thrive academically there. That could maybe be a different conversation, but it is a very good school. So he could, if he wants to get a good education in Miami, he can get one. And if he wants to, so then you say, well, okay, Miami's got 2 of those 3 things. One thing Miami can't sell is the national championship. Notre Dame can say, hey, we can sell you 2 of those 3 things, but we can also sell you a chance for a national championship. So I think that's the pitch that they have to have. And then Alabama can get you 2 of those 3 things, but they can't get you the academic piece, not to the degree that a Notre Dame can. So you have to be able to sell that up, and you have to continue to build that relationship. And when he gets on campus in the fall, you've got to look good. You've got to play well. That's going to be the key. If they go 9-3, 8-4, I'm not going to get them because the kid wants to play for championship, and he wants to be a high draft pick. So I think those, and I'll tell you something else. I think Jason Adamiola having a big year this year and Myron Tungavaloa having a big year this year is going to be very important to him, because if you can say, hey, look, we are going to have, this former 3 technique that we have a big end in Myron Tungavaloa-Mosa, he's going to ball out. We have this other guy, Jason Adamiola, who's very similar to you body type wise and game wise. Look what he did as a 3 technique and a 5 technique. Between those 2 guys, you're going to do all that stuff. And look what they did. I think those guys playing well this year could have a very big impact on being able to sell your product to Anthony Lucas specifically. So I think those are things that are going to be a big part of that equation, Vince. So you ready to rock and roll some more questions? I'm assuming you got pumped since you got kicked out of the room.
I did. I had technical difficulties with my mic. But I'm back, but I got bumped to like 140.
Okay.
So, but yeah, so here we go.
I'm up a little bit higher than you, so I've got a couple I can get to.
Go for it.
So if you want to go ahead and read them, I'll pull them up.
Yeah, absolutely. Would love to. Sean Rogers said, would love to see Watts get a fair shake. In my opinion, there is no way he shouldn't be on the 2 deep. Could not agree more. And I'll be honest with you, in my opinion, and this isn't necessarily what they showed us on Saturday. My personal opinion, if I was running the wide receiver room, Xavier Watts is my number 2 right behind Braden Lindsay.
He's playing W from what?
Right, I know.
Oh yeah,
He's playing the boundary side right now. Personally, what I would do with what the skill set that I believe that Xavier Watts has, I would put him as the X over on the field side, right behind Braden Lindsay, and that means he's going to get a lot of playing time. And so what my depth chart, Vince's depth chart, which means absolutely nothing to anybody, to Notre Dame. But for me, I would have Braden Lindsay and Xavier Watts. I would have Avery Davis, Lawrence Keys in the slot. And then I would have Austin and Wilkins at the X at the boundary. That's my 2 deep across the board. And then you could dial in some Cole Z, obviously. You could dial in some styles, some things like that. But that's my 1-2 across the board.
I'm going to say something.
Yeah, go ahead.
You're going to be surprised by.
Okay.
I would not have Xavier Watts my 2 deep.
Really?
Let me explain.
Okay, please do.
I'd have Lindsay and Styles at X. I'd have Davis and Keys at slot. I'd have Austin and Wilkins at boundary. And Xavier Watts would be, what position does he play? Receiver.
All of them. Yeah.
Receiver.
Sure.
So you know what I mean? Like, he's not technically in my 2 deep, but he's going to play everywhere. He may be my 4th, 5th receiver, but he's not tied into one spot.
Makes sense.
Does that make sense? I think he brings value at all 3 positions. And I think sometimes as a receivers coach, you have that guy that, he's not technically an X because he can do some things, but I really like to have him here. And he can really do some things over here. So he's not technically my 2 there. I've got to have somebody ready to step in to take that spot. And if, let's say, Braden Lindsay goes down, I wouldn't necessarily then want to pigeonhole Xavier Watts into the X. I'd say, hey, let's have Lorenzo step in there. Now, we're going to play Xavier more at X, but we need to make sure Lorenzo's ready to go so Lorenzo can take a lot of those X reps too, and we can still use Xavier. Because then if you had to just let's say Xavier's your number 5 receiver. Okay, just for argument's sake. You've got Austin, you've got Davis, you've got Keys, you got Lindsay. Okay, so those 4 guys right there.
Yep.
Xavier's your 5. He's playing like 25, 30 snaps a game. He's playing some X, he's playing some slides, playing some W. Okay. If, let's say, Braden Lindsay goes down and you have to put Xavier at X, you've now hindered yourself at 2 positions because you've lost Lindsay at X, but now you've lost your swing guy. You see what I'm saying? Whereas you can keep him in that swing role and maybe maybe give him 5 to 10 more X snaps than normal that he normally gets, but now Lorenzo's taking some of those too. And I don't want that to be Lorenzo's first chance of getting a lot of X snaps is then. And so I think if you're going to play Xavier all over the field, which is what I would do, you need to practice him all over the field, which means not necessarily locking him into a spot. That's how I would do it. So I hope that makes a little bit more sense. So he'd be in my 2 deep he'd be in my rotation. Yeah, I wouldn't necessarily have him as a number 2 anywhere. He'd be what position does Xavier Watts play? Cool. Receiver.
I like that.
That's where I'm coming from.
Did you read this one? Maddie K55 says, Sean, I'm also a huge fan of Watson. I hope to see him quite a bit early in the first 3 or 4 games.
I was just getting that up there while you were talking about him.
So. Absolutely. Yeah. Tyler Dijak says, agreed. So curious to see how this rotation shakes out. If we can get 6 to 7 guys work on game day, it'll pay off in the 4th quarter when our guys' legs are ready to go and their corners are dragging. No question. Could not agree more. They need to be 6 or 7 deep for this group to really see its potential, in my opinion.
Mm-hmm. A lot of people are big Xavier Watts fans.
And they should be.
No question. Great time to remind everyone of this. Thomas Walsh,
man.
Smash that like button. So hit the like button, subscribe to our channel, hit the notification bell. I actually forgot to tweet the show out today until after it had started. And we quickly got over to 100 before we even tweeted it out, which tells me there's a lot of people that are hitting the notification bell.
Yeah, man.
Which is very, very important.
Love that.
Brent Byers says, you put a Heisman level QB on this team and we're the North Carolina national champ faves. Seriously. I wouldn't say that. Faves, I wouldn't say that because I'm a big believer, Brent. I understand where you're coming from. I don't necessarily disagree with you, but I'm also a big believer that you got to prove it first
There's
You know,
there's a lot of areas.
Yeah. And it's not just quarterback, but I'll say this: I think there have been years in the past where if Notre Dame had a Heisman level quarterback, this team would have been hard to beat, no question. Brandon Wimbush ran like a Heisman Trophy candidate in 2017, but he wasn't playing like one as a thrower in the final 4 games of the year. You put Lamar Jackson on the 2017 football team, I'm not sure who beats them.
Yeah.
With all due respect, and I love Brandon, you know that. I was a big pro Brandon Wimbush guy, but he ain't Lamar Jackson.
I'm a huge Brandon Wimbush fan. Yeah.
You put and Lamar was in college in 2017. That's why I use him. If you take Louisville's quarterback and put him in Notre Dame, if you put Kyler Murray on that 2018 team, right? Heisman Trophy winner.
Sure.
I'd love to have watched that Notre Dame with Kyler Murray at quarterback against Clemson and Trevor Lawrence in 2018. I would have thoroughly enjoyed that battle.
Because it would have been a beatdown, in my opinion.
I don't know about that, but I think it would have been – I think it maybe.
I saw too many opportunities that Notre Dame missed out on offensively against that defense.
Kyler's definitely banging that post route to Miles Boykin on.
That's what I'm saying. Right. There's just so many opportunities that were missed that I don't think get missed. That's all I'm saying.
Yeah. No.
And therefore, Clemson's
I'm just saying, like
beating
Clemson. That 2018 Clemson team was really good.
I know.
I don't know if anyone could have beat them down. I think they'd have won. Sure. I don't think it would have been like 34-17. It wouldn't have been like the LSU. I mean, look. LSU with Joe Burrow and the greatest college offense we've ever seen beat them by 17.
Sure.
I don't know if Notre Dame didn't have Jamar Chase, Justin Jefferson.
Let me put it this way. My definition of beatdown is not like a beatdown of Toledo.
Okay.
Right? That's not my – it would be a sounding – like it would be, a sound victory. Let's put it that way. Where
I think they would have won. That's about
the situation would not be in doubt at the end. That's all I'm saying.
I could see that. Yeah. I think they would have won, no question, if they had Kyler Murray. So I mean, that's what I keep having this conversation with people is like Notre Dame's not as far away as people think.
Right.
At most positions, there's just one in particular they haven't been where they need to be.
Sure.
So we'll see how that goes. Truman also asked, how are Diggs and Estime looking so far? We addressed that part of the Anthony Lucas, CJ Williams thing. I do think there's merit to that when you can land kids from similar regions. Diggs and Estime, it's too early to tell, Truman. We've only seen Vince has only seen like 30 minutes. I'll say this. I think from what I've talked to some people, Vince said the same thing. They both look to be in really good shape, and they're a lot bigger than what Notre Dame has at running back right now.
Right.
They definitely add some size to that, correct?
Yep.
Here's an interesting one, Vince, and I want to get your immediate thoughts on this.
Okay.
Jeff Fluke, hot take. This offense will produce the most points per game of the BK era.
What's the top of the BK era right now? Do you know?
36.1 in 2019.
Yeah, I don't think that's a super hot take. I think that's a definite possibility. I mean,
if they don't surpass that, then there's a problem.
Yes, I think that's a very sound take from Jeff, and it's nothing against Jeff because I think a lot of people that are not in this chat and on this video right now would say that Jeff is crazy. But personally, I think, Jeff, you're right on the money, and I think that this offense will far surpass that.
Yeah.
I think they'll be closer to 40 than they will be to 35.
Yeah, they have to get to at least 38. And again, Notre Dame's not going to score 49 a game. They don't need to score 49 a game.
I'm not expecting that either.
I know. A lot of people compare them to like Clemson. I don't think they need to score 49 a game. I think their defense is going to be better than that. I just feel like they need to maximize their potential. They need to be 38 to 42 somewhere in there. But it's also about bringing a better performance when you're playing in those bigger games. Ultimately, that's if you're averaging 45 points a game, but you only score 17 when you get to the playoff, then it doesn't matter.
Doesn't matter at all. Right. Yeah, and I want to see a team that can put some teams away a little bit sooner because they're going out and scoring the football. You know what I mean? Like, look, this thing is done. Let's move on, because they can go down and they can score and they're taking advantage of their opportunities and things like that. Like, I don't necessarily want them piling on points at the end of the game. That doesn't do anything for me. So I guess the manner in which they score those points is important to me. But I still think that they're going to be above the 36 and change for sure.
And if they're at 42 or 40 or 39 and they're piling up on, it's like the perfect example is you have to look at that is the highest scoring offense was 2019. Does anyone think that the 2019 was Notre Dame's best offense? No.
No.
They scored 66 against Nevada or New Mexico, and they scored 52 against Bowling Green.
Right.
Yeah,
Those the numbers.
Right. Big time. So, yeah, I mean, the 2017 offense was better. The 2015 offense was better.
Yes.
Now this offense needs to be on line with those. But now and look, we said this. Look, if you take last year's offense as it was, meaning same number of runs, same number of passes, same number of red zone opportunities, everything is equal. But they had the same red zone touchdown rate as they had in 2019. They'd averaged 38 points a game last year.
Yep.
So again, we're not saying throw more, run better, nothing. We're not saying get more. So again, when I calculate that, it's not giving them additional red zone trips.
It's being more successful.
Turning the trips they already made into touchdowns instead of misses or field goals.
Right.
They'd have been at 38 points a game. So just that change there gets you into that zone. Now, the problem is you go and play Alabama, you only had 2 red zone trips the whole game, and I think one of them came in the first 3 quarters.
Right.
So actually, I think Notre Dame scored on both of their red zone trips against that. No, they had the turnover on downs at the end, right? They had a couple turnovers on downs. They had 3 red zone trips in the fourth quarter, 1 in the first 3, right? So, I mean, so there's still work to do, but still 38 points a game. That's a big jump. Now, if you can be a good red zone offense like you were in 17 to 19, and then improve some of these other areas, that's where you can see the jump up to 41, 40, 41, 42.
Yeah.
So it's going to require those 2 things both happening. Great red zone offense, and then being more explosive. Those are going to be the keys. And that's also how you win those big games. Because you're not just going to nickel and dime and methodically move up and down the field against Alabama Series. They did it once against Bama. Looked great. They didn't do it any other times the rest of the game. That's why they only scored 14 points. Matty K says, I actually believe we have a deep tight end group. Hope we can get to see a lot of these tight ends early. I'm not sure if they're going to go past 2 a whole lot early, especially if Kevin Bauman being banged up. I could see them being 12, but I don't know how I don't see them doing 13 as much as they did last year.
Yeah.
Just at least not early.
Right.
Because of those things. But I also don't want to see a ton of 12 personnel to the degree that we saw it last year because I want to see more receivers.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's about the strength of your team.
Yeah.
I'm not going to read Ian Book. I'm not going to read Brent. I'm going to actually put it up. I'm sorry. Brent Meyer says, if Ian Book was back for a 9th year, we would be 37th.
That's pretty good.
That was really good.
That was pretty good.
Very, very good. Okay, let's get to some more questions. Let's see here. Truman also asked, will we eventually have a permanent number 1 ranking dethroning the likes of Ohio State and Alabama, referring to, I believe, recruiting rankings.
Yeah.
I just don't see that happening in the current system.
Right.
Now, where that could happen, and there was a question down here that I wanted to get to that kind of addresses that. So, Vince, that question was at the 140 mark. Are you there, or are you still below?
I could be. I worked. Okay. You're in my zone now.
So, do you see Truman's question about the permanently number 1 thing? Okay, so if you could kind of lock that, because I did want to get down here and find another question that was relative to that was related to that question that I want to address, and it was about SI All-American. And it, like I said, it is a good question because I have pushed back in a big way against putting too much emphasis on the points-based recruiting system, and it can have some flaws. So I want to get to let me see here. Is that actually a Tennessee fan?
Do we have one of those?
We're gonna being a moron, so we're gonna boot him out. So so gonna boot that idiot out of here. It's like you're a Tennessee, biggest losers ever. All right,
now they're just still hopped up on Peyton Manning.
There's a lot of people. How many national championships? You couldn't even win a championship with Peyton Manning. Can it be floored with Peyton Manning? Get out of here with that nonsense. I'm trying to find that question, but it's essentially referring to how SI. Oh, here we go. Brendan Burtis says, Brian, you have talked about the problem of points-based recruiting class. How would you rank Notre Dame's current class? And will SI All-American put out a recruiting class ranking? Couple things about that. So I would currently rank Notre Dame's recruiting class number 1, but it wouldn't mean a ton to me because so many classes are incomplete compared to Notre Dame, who's getting close to being done.
Right.
So I think there's the things that to me factor into how a class should be ranked is number 1, obviously top end talent. You need top end talent, right? You need difference makers, and you need difference makers in multiple positions. So if you're just loading up on elite offensive linemen year after year after year, that doesn't do a whole lot for you because you need elite playmakers at other positions as well. So I like the balance of it. And so that's what I like about this class. You've got really good tight ends. You've now got elite playmakers at receiver. You've got big-time defensive linemen. You have big-time linebackers. You've got incredibly talented, secondary players. You've got elite players, not elite players, but like dynamic players at multiple positions. This class needs at least 1 or 2 more top 50 guys to stay in that top 2 or 3, in my opinion. You need a Nwangwu and a Lucas.
Yes, those are the two.
I think the other part is balance. And and balance means not just loading up on a couple positions, or just being great on one side of the ball. That's something that's hurt Notre Dame in past years. There's been years Notre Dame's had a great offensive class, and the defensive class didn't live up to the standard. Years where the defensive class has been really good, and the offensive class wasn't where it needs to be. What I like about this class, and this is what you see at Alabama and Ohio State and Clemson, year after year after year, is they're loading up on both sides of the ball. It's not just dominating at one, and that's what's hurt Oklahoma. Now, if Oklahoma can start recruiting defense better and coaching defense better, that's going to make them super dangerous because their offense is where it needs to be. They're kind of the opposite of Notre Dame, right? If talking about joining conferences, if Notre Dame and Oklahoma kind of molded into one football program, they're not getting beat by anybody. Yeah. You put that offense with the Notre Dame defense kind of thing, right? And give them Notre Dame's defensive coaches. So I just you look at that, and then it's also about meeting needs. Are you meeting the needs that your program currently has that you're currently lacking? Those are, to me, and then the fourth is depth. Mm-hmm. But there are some years where you're only going to have – there's been years of Bama only signed like 17 guys by choice because that's all they needed. They had a ton of guys coming back. Well, how do you evaluate that compared to a class that signed 25 in a points-based system? There's been years I would have seen that 17-man class, and I wouldn't trade my 17-man class for your 27-man class. Because you had the room for 27. We didn't, but we got elite players. We met our needs and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. So I think those, Brendan, are the things that would go into how a class should be evaluated, right? Now, the way that SI All-American, we actually do have rankings out, but right now Notre Dame is 4th on that list, but they don't update them every time somebody commits. They kind of do it like once a month. Sure. Notre Dame was number 2 at one point, and then as Penn State and LSU, I think it was Penn State and LSU, like loaded up on kids, then they went ahead of Notre Dame because Penn State's like 24. When Notre Dame's class was ranked 4th, it was without Tobias Merriweather and without CJ Williams. Right. Those are 2 top 100 players on SI All-Americans. And matter of fact, Notre Dame was 4th. They just added their highest ranked recruit on the SI All-American list of Tobias Merriweather, who ranks 46th in the country. And they added CJ Williams, who on the SI 99 ranks 88th. So Notre Dame would clearly have jumped up at least to number 2, if not number 1, this is just my opinion, with that. But of course, they won't be updating that until the end of the month. So I don't know where Notre Dame is going to fall. I think they're locked in as a top 3 class. I'd probably put them number 1 right now just because of the volume. And they have met, and here's why volume matters right now. They filled more needs than a class with 14 or 15 guys. Penn State would not be a top 5 class for me right now because it's more about volume than it is about impact talent across the board. However, it's a very good Penn State class. Don't get me wrong. And it's kind of offensive class they needed. They got some impact players on offense. Drew Allert, quarterback. Nicholas Singleton at running back. Caden Saunders is a good player receiver that gives them a skill set they need there. But there's still some areas where they're good, but they're not where they need to be. So I would not have them there. I'd probably have them 4th or 5th right now. I just don't think they're going to – what I meant to say is they're not going to finish in the top 5 because they're pretty much close to being done. They've got room for maybe 1 or 2 more guys, and that's about it. So that's where I have them. But those are very good questions, and I just wanted to say that's why I like the SI All-American way of doing things, not just because we work with them and I'm a part of it, but this is something I've been saying for years. before I was part of the SI network, that's how a recruiting class needs to be evaluated, is the subjective nature. And they say, well, we want to avoid people being critical. They're going to criticize you no matter what. So do it the best way possible, the most rational way possible. Now, guess what? Alabama's still going to finish with top classes every year.
Yeah.
Because they're meeting needs. They're getting impact players. They're balanced on both sides of the ball. But what you would do is you'd remove Florida State from being ranked high. Because you're like, they had 5 stars at 2 positions, and they didn't sign a quarterback. They signed a bunch of bums on the offensive line, and lo and behold, they stink. But, boy, they got all these highly ranked recruits at, like, 3 positions. Receiver, running back, and, like, secondary, right? But they, in some years it's, other positions. But you get the point that I'm making. Ohio State would still rank high. Bama would still rank high. Clemson would rank higher than they really have been. Georgia maybe not as high. Florida State not as high. Tennessee not as high. And it would be more of a rational ranking, in my opinion. A more subjective ranking, which is, to me, what is needed.
There were a bunch of comments that got washed away, obviously, early on. But a lot of people talking about the Shamrock uniforms that got put out today. Asking, everybody was talking about it. There was obviously some love. There was obviously some shade being thrown.
Always going to be the case, yeah.
Always. And they want our opinion on what they are and how they look and all that stuff. So I can go first if you want.
Yeah, go for it.
So the pictures that I saw, the leaked pictures, right, look terrible. They look really bad, but it had like the big baggy sleeves, and it didn't look good to me. Now the ones that actually came out and they were on the kids, I believe Kyron Williams and Houston Griffith are the guys that modeled them or whatever. They actually don't look bad to me. And I will also say that the word was that they were just going to recycle the ones that they were going to use last year at Lambeau Field and all this other stuff. Well, then they came out with the reasoning behind some of the stuff that they put on these, and it's all Chicago based. And so I do like that. I thought it was going to be just a lazy, like, these are the ones we were going to do, so let's just go with it. They actually did design these around Chicago with the stripes and the stars and, things of that nature. They basically took Notre Dame's uniform and just kind of tweaked it a little bit. So, I mean, it still has kind of a basic look to it, which I like. I'm not a huge fan of stripes on the pants, but I understand why they did it. 10 times better than the Yankee pants, and I'm sure that I'm going to catch flack for that. I hated
from
that.
Some people, others not so much.
I hated that. I didn't like that.
I loved it.
Yeah, because I hate the Yankees.
Because you're playing in, I get that. I mean,
right, but you're playing in Yankee Stadium.
And you're going to see that with people who don't like these. They hate the Bears, and so they're going to think these are stupid. But I'm going to pull this up real quick, Vince.
Please do.
I'm going to play the video. Can you take that one? That question
absolutely.
Down? Actually, I got it.
Okay, thanks.
Let me put the sound on.
And I got my guy, Kyron Williams, here. This year we play in Wisconsin in the Shamrock Series at Chicago. And today, I'm going to show them what Chicago has to offer. Yes, sir. Let's get it. Let's get it. All right, we just got to Chicago. And on our first stop, we're going to check out the Bean today. Woo! Sweet. My high school's prom was over here. For some reason, I feel like we passed the Ferris wheel. Sheesh, they got a map. The Great Lake, Lake Michigan, Navy Pier, man. On to the next. Woo! Yeah, you see it? My city. God, look, man. We're in Chicago. That's my middle school down there, bro. Yay. Food check. All right, we just arrived at the Chicago River. Just showing my boy Kyron one of the many stops that we have to offer in Chicago. Hey, Ace, you think they can turn the water Irish Spring green?
We're eventually going to get to the actual
Guess we're going to have to find out. We pulling up to the last stop, which is the best stop, Soldier Field, where we're going to be playing our game versus Wisconsin. I think it's time to go check it out. Let's go see what it's talking about. Let's go. Sir. Well, since we already at Soldier Field, we might as well go check out the field. Huh? It's only right, bro. Shoot, let's do it. Yeah. You know what we need to do, bro? What's that? We need to break this field in. Let's get to it then. Let's do it.
Is this the...
Wait. What's wrong? We ain't dressed for all this right now. See this drip? We got the new shoes, the new pants, and the new jerseys. We ready to go. We looking sweet, man. Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Houston's got to close out that coverage.
Yeah. Hey, we only missing one thing. What you think we missing? The best part of the uniform. It's the gold helmets, obviously. Just check out the details on the back. You see the stars? Look at that. Nobody else is doing like that. September 25th, be there. We playing in my city, Chicago, at Soldier Field versus Wisconsin. Go Irish, baby.
First of all, you're muted, Vince.
I like the fact they didn't mess up the helmets. They kept gold helmets. I'm all about that. That's great. And again, they did the stripes because of the stripes on the Chicago flag, and they did the stars because of the stars on the Chicago flag and things like that. But they kind of tweaked it. And I will also say those numbers are going to be really easy to spot too, which I dig. I dig that a lot. So
I don't hate them. I just don't like them. I just feel like if you're going to do a Shamrock uniform, do more than just adding a couple stripes here. And
that's all they did. That's really all they did. And they changed the font of the numbers.
Yeah. I mean, so I kind of feel like, I don't know. I didn't love them. I didn't hate them. I just, whatever. I could do without them. I feel like if you're going to do something that's going to like stand out, like make them green or, put a, like one of my favorite alternate uniforms Notre Dame has had is the 2011 uniforms they had at Michigan, where they had like the green numbers and then the green stripes here, and then you just put the green shamrock on the helmet.
Yep.
I don't know. They're just kind of dull to me.
I kind of dug the all white ones they did that one year.
Against Arizona State,
they had the all white pants, all white jerseys,
but they were green, and it
had the green accents, which it was all white with green accents. I dug that. I don't like when they mess with the helmet. I will say that.
Yeah.
So I'm glad that they just stuck with the helmet the way it's supposed to be. So totally. Cool
it just depends. The helmet part just depends on what you do with the helmet, and it's got to fit. Like the one year they had like half of it looked like a kickball. Like a gold kickball, and the other half was blue.
Dumb.
That looked dumb.
Terrible.
But like the Yankee Stadium one, I liked it. And I know because I don't hate the Yankees. I don't care about the Yankees. I'm I'm a Reds fan. Why do I care about the Yankees? But I mean, look, I also I thought maybe if you were there, you might have thought differently because you're in Yankee Stadium and and you're like, it's the pinstripes. And I just thought it was a great. It was a
nod to the Yankee. I mean, it was a nod to where they were.
It's two of the great franchise programs, whatever sports institutions in history, that have a lot of history together. Some of Notre Dame's greatest games were played in Yankee Stadium. Right. So I thought it was cool, and I thought they looked great in person. I mean, they look. I mean, and that's the thing about like some of these, they don't look good on TV. I get why some people didn't like the Yankee Stadium ones. I get it. They've been hit or miss. These are just kind of whatever.
There's nothing special about them.
They're not bad. They're not like, oh my God, those are hideous. Like they've had a couple of those, but it just seems kind of like you've had 2 years to get ready for this. And
this is what you came up with.
But I don't know what else you could have done for Chicago other than, you know what I think I might've liked, Vince, but see, then you'd kind of get into, do you really want to do green because who's their rival? It's the Packers. And whatever, but I would have probably liked a little bit more if it was green instead of blue.
Sure.
That's just me.
Yeah.
Or,
I like the green.
I think what I would have liked better too is if maybe they would have done it where Notre Dame was actually the road team, like they actually are on the schedule. It's technically a home game for Wisconsin.
Yeah, it's an away game. Yeah.
I would have liked it if they would have gone like white jerseys and blue pants. Then it is kind of a a nod
to the Bears.
The Bears, right?
Yeah, right.
Because so I don't know, just a thought, but
and Wisconsin came out with their jerseys first, and they were white on white. They were white on white, so they're going to be all white, which I thought was interesting. So I wonder who made that call. I wonder if Wisconsin made the call, but like, look, it's our home game. We want to be all white, so that may have who knows? I don't know. Anyway, all right.
I'm done talking about it, but I didn't hate them, didn't love them, they just don't do anything for me. And that's been the disappointing thing is as much as I liked Under Armour gear for a while, their uniform things, other than the BC game in 2019, that was the absolute best alternate uniform. I don't even really count it as an alternate uniform.
Were those the throwback ones?
Their uniforms from '88.
Yeah.
Where they actually had pants that kind of matched the helmets, and they
knocked that out of the park. Knocked it out of the park.
Those were phenomenal.
Knocked it out.
Those are phenomenal.
Yep. I completely agree with that. Eric Ward says, I think Williams should get the majority of the carries. He runs angry, and he will. Barring injury, he will get the majority of the carries.
Majority meaning like more than 50%, by definition of a majority, or like from a volume standpoint of like we talk about sports. I guess that's kind of what I would.
Okay, fair enough.
Be curious about, like, what part of do you mean majority? I mean, should he get 50%, more than 50% of the carries, which technically is a majority? Yes, agree with you.
Yes, that's what I thought of it.
Should he get 80% of the carries, like sometimes we think about when you think of the majority? No, he shouldn't. But yes, he runs very angry. He will be Notre Dame's number one back this year, barring injury. And I don't know if anyone that's saying he shouldn't be. It's just more about, and no one like us who's saying Chris Tyree needs to play more is saying you shouldn't use Kyron.
Right.
We're saying you should use them together more and then get Chris Tyree touches early, which is going to help Kyron Williams, in my opinion.
Tyler Dijak says, thought the main difference in the two Clemson games was how well Clemson contained Book in the second game. Didn't let him outside and use his legs, kept him in the pocket.
Yeah, I think the biggest difference in the game is that the Notre Dame defense didn't generate 10 points, and Notre Dame couldn't punch the ball in the end zone early. I mean, we chatted about this last week. I still would like to have known what Notre Dame got into Clemson territory on all three of their first drives. They made a field goal, missed a field goal, turnover on downs. Put the ball in the end zone. That's what we talk. Like, if you had the red zone offense you had in past years, it's 17-3. Notre Dame was winning 17-3. I think there's a lot of differences, Tyler. I thought the biggest difference for me was Trevor Lawrence, because having him in the offense to be able to run the offense, to run the spread, to be able to run the read zones, those things kept the Notre Dame defense off balance. And it allowed them to control the clock. It allowed the Notre Dame offense to stay off the field. And the other big difference isn't how Clemson contained Book. It's how Book contained Book in the second game. The absolute unwillingness to throw the ball down the field, to take any chances whatsoever in that game, was ultimately what did it, and from what gave the offense another chance. But defensively, Notre Dame was not having a good day defending Clemson with Trevor Lawrence. I mean, it just showed how big of a difference he can make.
Truman says, give me an unbiased as you can how elite is CJ Williams and what his NFL comparable. Ditto for Tobias Merriweather. Might be a little early for Tobias Merriweather. He's going to be a senior in high school, but
I mean, if we're gonna, I think Tobias is an elite player. I think CJ's really good. I don't have CJ as an elite player yet. I think he's top 100 guy. Tobias is a top 50 recruit, and if you're a top 50 recruit, you're elite. CJ to me is a really good player, and he's a great number 2 complement to a number 1. And the comp for him, the NFL comp that I've used for CJ a lot is, he's a Michael Thomas, Juju Smith-Schuster kind of guy, a DeAndre Hopkins kind of guy. I mean, matter of fact, I did an article where I kind of, people, he's not fast, he doesn't separate. I'm like, well, Michael Thomas doesn't separate incredibly well either. No, neither does Cooper Kupp, but you look at that kind of guy, a Juju Smith-Schuster kind of guy, a Michael Thomas kind of guy, who, remember, in college wasn't an elite player. He was a 40-50 catch for 700 yards kind of guy. I think CJ can be more than that. I think CJ can catch a lot more balls than that, but he could be a Juju type of guy. For Tobias Merriweather, my comps are, you can pick one of the two, whichever one you like the best. My favorite one for him going into his junior year was T. Higgins. Now, after watching him as a junior, where I think Tobias got another jump in speed, because I had Tobias as a top 60 to 75 player based on his sophomore film, because he was really good, but he just wasn't explosive. So junior, he was more explosive, which jumped him into the top 50. So his grade changed after seeing his junior film. And that made, I think, Justin Jefferson a better comp for him than even T. Higgins, because T was great. T was a great player. And if Tobias Merriweather is as good as T. Higgins, he'll be a phenomenal player at Notre Dame, as T was at Clemson. But I think his skill set now is more similar to Justin Jefferson, who is a lot like T. Higgins, but just faster. And that's why, and a little more precise route runner. And so I think either one of those two works for me with him.
Interesting comment here by Eric. He says the coaches didn't know that teams were going to load the box and they had no plan. Horrible. They had a plan. Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead.
No, go ahead, Vince. You got it.
I'm sure they had a plan. It just wasn't executed. I mean, that's the issue is they didn't have the trigger man to execute the play.
Are you talking about a specific game, or are you talking about just all season?
I all season, I think, is what he's talking, because we talked about how that's how teams would scheme against Notre Dame's offense. They'd load the box and dare Ian Book to beat them with his arm. Right?
Yeah, I think that they absolutely had a game plan. They were absolutely prepared for teams to do that, which is why they had the success that they had. That's why they averaged over 200 yards rushing per game. They knew it. They ran a lot of 12 and 13 personnel. That's part of the plan to be able to combat loaded boxes. It's what Wisconsin does.
Good point.
In other games, they did take their shot. And look, Tommy Rees had plenty of games during the season where he called shots to be taken. The quarterback didn't make the throw.
Right.
Eventually, he just stopped making those calls, which is good coaching. When you know your quarterback's not going to make the throw, you don't keep freaking making the same call and then getting mad when he doesn't execute something he's proven he's not going to execute.
Right.
But then as we kind of got later into the year, you started to see the offense open up a little bit. It opened up a little bit against North Carolina. It opened up a lot against Boston College. And then all of a sudden, what happens? You lose Jarrett Patterson, you lose Tommy Kramer. Right? So, I mean, the offense was just starting to take off when they lost Jarrett Patterson and Tommy Kramer. And if we're honest about that, who knows what they would have done the final two games if they were still healthy. I don't think they would have necessarily beat Clemson, but maybe they would have been in a better position to maybe punch in some of those early scores.
Sure.
So they certainly had a plan. My issue is I didn't love the plan, but they knew who they were. They knew what their limitations were as an offense. And I think the other thing we haven't talked enough about, or some people maybe aren't accepting, is the fact that the entire offseason they built their offense thinking they were going to have Kevin Austin and Braden Lindsay. And by the first few games of the year, they didn't have either one of them. By Pitt, they didn't have either one of them.
Right.
Because Kevin was banged up, played very little, caught one pass, and then was out by the Pitt game, which was what, game 5? He was out for the year before the Pitt game. Remember, the Pitt game was the day it was announced that he was done.
Right.
Braden Lindsay was never 100%, missed the opener, played against South Florida, only caught 3 balls, played a little against Florida State, but you could see in that game he had no burst whatsoever in that game. And then by Pitt, he was done again, and he never was a factor again. When you lose your 2 most explosive players,
it changes things.
It's going to change things.
It just does. It just does.
And so does that mean that I like what they did? No, but they had a plan. I think Eric, if we were going to have a constructive conversation, I think we could discuss whether or not the plan that they had was the most effective. But and the thing I'd somewhat disagree with you, Vince, is I do think they executed the plan relatively well last year, with the exception of a couple games. Like Duke was not, Louisville was not, but like against Pitt, they did exactly what they wanted to do. Against Georgia Tech, they did exactly what they wanted to do. Control the clock, run the ball, and win.
Yeah.
And I didn't like it. It basically doomed them for defeat against Clemson and Alabama, but that was the game plan. And I think that they executed that well up front. I think where there was a bad execution was, to your point, Vince, was a quarterback.
Yeah.
There were opportunities to maybe put an extra touchdown or so a game on the board that they couldn't do or didn't do because the quarterback wasn't willing to do that. But then you look at the BC game when the quarterback was taking more chances, and they absolutely throttled Boston College.
Right.
Throttled them. Because the quarterback was, and we all know why Ian was taking more chances that game.
Of course.
I just wish maybe he could have played against Phil Dracovic in every other game. Maybe then he would have been better.
Right.
So
right, exactly.
It is what it is. Yeah. I can't wait till we can stop talking about that.
I know. Someday. Sean Rogers says, can we all agree that Joe Wilkins is not a dude? He's a rotational receiver at best. Watts and Styles, in my opinion, are far superior to him already.
Far superior talent-wise, yes. Now they have to prove that they can, execute and run the routes, and the coach needs to do everything possible.
Agreed.
Like if Joe Wilkins grades out at 95% every day, and those guys are at 65%, and you just say, "Oh, well, he's the guy," then you stink as a coach. You're just like, okay, I need to get those guys hired because they're way better than that guy, talent-wise.
Exactly.
And you can have all the transformational off seasons you want. I think Joe could be a good, solid rotation player.
Me too.
He's not Javon McKinley. He's not Chase Claypool. He's not Miles Boykin. He's not those guys. He's just not. And they need to. My fear is that they're going to try to turn him into that.
Right.
I hope that doesn't happen, but that's my big fear.
John Rich, I expect to see Kyron play a bit more in the slot. Not a bit more. I would say a lot more than he did.
I think so.
Yeah, I agree with that as well.
I think we were also starting to see that last year too, and then he got hurt. Remember, the BC game was the game we really saw him out a lot. Remember, he had 2 routes where he caught from the slot position. One was on an in cut on 3rd down, but then he banged his shoulder up that game, and they were like, okay, we need him at running back, and so they stopped doing it as much. But yeah, I agree with you, John.
Matty K says, Brian, I think the other receiver at Clemson was Sharon Peak. Maybe
no, that's not who I'm thinking of. It's a small. I'm gonna look it up now. Sharon Peak was good. He was hurt a lot. Is a smaller guy. Artavis Scott. That's who it was. In 2015, Artavis had 93 catches for 901 yards, 9.7 yards per carry, and his role was an extension of the running game. Is who it was. Now, Sharon Peak had 50 catches for 716 yards that year, but that's not who I was referring to. And I was more looking at the 2016 team as well. Sharon Peak, I don't know if he was on that team or not, but he was hurt. That's the year they had Mike Williams, Deion Kane, you had Hunter Renfro, Ray McLeod, and then Artavis Scott. That year had 76 catches for 614 yards. So, again, he was just a quick game, catch the quicks, take a screen behind the line and get 6-7 yards out of it. That's basically what he was. And, it worked for him.
Andrew Goss, Tyree versus a linebacker isn't fair.
Nope.
Tyron, yeah. I was going to say, Notre Dame's running backs, the top 2 running backs versus a linebacker isn't fair. And I agree with that completely. John, again, he says, if O-line can give Jack Cohn time, this could be a really explosive passing offense. It would set up open space for the second level for Williams, Tyree, and anyone else to chew up big yardage.
Yeah. Agree.
Absolutely.
Agree. John Rich is 2 for 2 today, Vince. 2 very good observations.
Yeah, right.
So far. Well done.
Here we go. Matt Lass, he says, back from my vacation, came home to my IB hoodie and with a onesie for my daughter waiting in the mail. Stoked about last week's pickups. Love that they can start focusing on an even better 23 class.
So he came home from vacation and he had the hoodie, the onesie, Tobias Merriweather, and CJ Williams all waiting on him.
That's not a bad thing to come home
pretty good return from vacation. No question about it. No question about it.
That's great.
Yep.
Andrew says this year does have a lot of potential to be a breakout year for Tommy Rees. Yeah. Which I completely agree with.
Yeah, I mean, if the offense plays its potential and they get to 40 points a game, I mean, Tommy Rees is rightfully going to deserve a lot of credit for that. And it would be definitely a breakout year because he's still in his 20s. And if you get a 20-something-year-old coordinator that's leading your team to a playoff because of his unit, whereas last year was kind of like in spite of his unit, with all due respect, it's certainly a breakout.
Michael Campbell says, who are the next 2 players on the recruiting trail for Notre Dame's offense to commit that are highly sought after? It's a good time to strike with the number 1 class on Rivals and the number 2 with 247 and ESPN.
I don't know if they're going to get 2 more offensive players.
I was going to say they need an offensive lineman, but I don't think they're going to get both of them.
If they just got Billy Schrouth and called it a day on offense, I'd say, okay.
Yeah, exactly.
What I would like to have happen, Michael, to answer your question, is I'd like for them to get Billy Schrouth or Zach Rice, but I prefer Schrouth. But either one of those guys, and then
get the slot guys.
Xavier Bradshaw or Major Everhart. Yeah. That's what I would want to see happen. But the reality is the guys that are going to solidify this as a top 1 to 3 class are finishing on defense. Right. It's going to be getting Lucas Nawakpa and Hero Canoe. That's what's going to give them a chance to lock into that spot. Now, Zach Rice is the guy that you should want Notre Dame to get if you care about recruiting rankings more than what they turn out to be, because he's a 5-star, and that's the kind of guy that can really shoot your rankings up big time, is that kind of player. Although, if you're someone who believes this type of thing, that Zach Rice's recruiting ranking may drop a little bit with some of those if he commits to Notre Dame. But that's not what happened with Blake Fisher. Like, Rivals kept Blake Fisher as a 5-star last year, and even though he's committed to Notre Dame. So we'll see how it goes.
Paul says having a quarterback that'll hit you in stride when you are open won't hurt the receiving core. It has to be more fun to play when you know your reward is coming.
Yeah. Yeah, when the timing is there, you're going to get the ball. If you do your job, it's going to get out to you.
Right.
Look, when you know you're the number 3 read and your offense rarely gets in a number 3 read, this was something that I've heard complaints about the last couple of years.
Yeah.
And I heard complaints about this too. This was an issue they had with Brandon Wimbush in 2017 is he 1-2 run. So it's like, I'm the 4th option in this play. Why the heck would I run my route 100 miles an hour? It can be frustrating.
Exactly. I love that last part of that because it's so true. Because look, it's a reward thing. I mean, you're running routes to get the ball. I mean, you're doing your thing so you can make plays. I mean, that's why you're on the field, right? And I mean, there's times to be selfless and there's times to be selfish. And I'm okay with that. And but yeah, when you know that you're doing the right things and then you're going to get rewarded with the ball, I completely agree. It makes you work that much harder with what you're doing.
Yeah. I got one down here for you, Vince. Okay,
hit
go
it.
ahead. No, go ahead.
Okay. D-Rock says that he agrees with you. There's a time and a place that are important when rip jobs become necessary with your coaching staff.
Yeah.
We were talking about that earlier.
Yep. Matthew Southgate's got one, Vince.
Yeah, he says, definitely truth, Brian. Notre Dame on offense seems like they want to be perfect in the sense that it's less about player and more about scheme. Sad.
Mm-hmm. Here's something I want to address too. So a couple things. Number one is Michael Campbell talking about the misinformation. I don't know where I don't go on anyone else's sites or board, but the reality is we made it very clear on this show that it's for only Peacock is streaming all of Notre Dame's games next year. The only one that is exclusively on Peacock is the Toledo game, which we made very clear in the show. So
correct.
Now, something that's frustrated me, and Eric Ward says, don't pay for the Toledo game. If a lot of people buy that game, we might be paying for games in the future. You're going to be doing that eventually anyway, unfortunately.
Yeah, that's coming. That's happening.
But I will say this. Here's something that's really frustrated me. I am really sick and tired of Notre Dame fans who are telling people that don't want to buy the game that you're not a real fan. I'm so sick of that. Just because they don't – look, there are some fans that Notre Dame could spit in their drink and hand it to them, and they'll take it and love it. Because they love Notre Dame, and that's fine. I have no problem with it. If that's your thing, and Notre Dame can do no wrong, good for you. But what I'm sick of are those people telling people who are like, you know what, like, it's frustrating for me. Like, look, let people make their choice. It's like with anything else. You should have the freedom to make a choice that you think is best for you and your family. And if you don't like my choice, then mind your freaking business, okay? But this is my opinion, and I'm going to share my opinion. I have opinion that's different from other people. That's fine. But the reality is that if all those fans keep doing that, then don't complain when nothing is free for Notre Dame anymore. I had somebody email me and called me a hypocrite because he said, well, how can you do this? How can you complain about this when you're having people pay $4.99 for a message board? And I said, after ripping him a little bit, which I kind of felt bad for, but not really, because your first interaction ever with me was to call me hypocrite, and you say you've consumed. Oh, he said the thing that frustrated me was he said, I've consumed over 300 hours of your podcast. And I'm like, how much did you pay for those 300 hours of the podcast? Nothing. I share our information on 6 different platforms. 5 of those 6, I share them for free. The last time I put a premium story out on my message board, I haven't put a single. It's 2020. We're now in August. I've not put a single premium. Every single article I've written at Irish Breakdown in 2021 has been free. Every single podcast is free. We don't beg for super chats the way that some other channels do. If you choose to give one, great. You can be a huge Notre Dame fan and consume every single ounce of information that we've done for the last 2 years. You could have got for free. Now, we need to also be able to pay bills, so we do a one message board thing, and I've put very little on that message board that's not out everywhere else. And here's the difference between that and Notre Dame. Everything Notre Dame does costs you money. The only thing you could do is watch them on their home games. You could have the most basic cable package imaginable, or you don't even need cable.
You don't even need cable.
The basic TV package
just
possible.
Rabbit ears.
And you can watch Notre Dame. That's going away. So now literally as a Notre Dame fan, there's nothing you can get from Notre Dame for free, except 99% of the Irish Breakdown content. You know what I mean? So yeah, there are some people that's a problem, or they don't know how to stream, or they live out in the middle of nowhere where there's horrible internet service, which still exists in this country, and they're not going to be able to do that. So making your product less accessible to the fans that made you this billion-dollar institution to begin with is not a good thing, in my opinion. And some people have the right to say they don't like it. And it doesn't make them less of a Notre Dame fan. If anything, I think it makes you more of a Notre Dame fan because you love your institution enough to stand up and say, this isn't right. And just taking it every single time they tell you, hey, you know what? You're a low middle class family. We don't really care about whether or not you come to games because we're trying to make money. So tickets are going to cost this. I have a friend of mine who's got almost as many, actually, he's got as many kids as you do. He's been to 2 Notre Dame games in the last 5 years. Both of them are games where I got him tickets. Loves Notre Dame. Can't afford to go.
Yep.
Right? And so it's like,
that's an epidemic too, as far as like, I can't take my family to a Chicago Cubs game. I can't take my family to a Bears game. I can't take my family to a Notre Dame game.
Now the one thing you can do with your family,
right,
that's cheap, is sit home and watch the game.
Absolutely. Right.
And now that's going to cost you money.
Right.
You know, so people who aren't okay with that should have the right to speak up. And if you are okay with that, you have a right to speak up as well.
Right.
Don't start saying people who aren't that way aren't real fans.
Yeah. Don't tell me how to be a fan.
I get sick of that. There's not one way to be a Notre Dame fan.
Exactly.
There isn't. Sorry, that rant over, but I wanted to address that.
I love that.
Let's move on quickly. We got this one from
Did you have another one?
Yeah.
Go ahead. Oh,
right there.
That's one I clicked too. All right. Matthew Southgate says, let's say Kevin Austin has the year that we expect. Do you see him going pro or staying for another year? That's a really, really good question.
I think he has to go pro.
Yeah.
I think him and Braden Lindsay, if they have big years, I mean, even if Braden just has like a 35, 40 touches for 20 yards a touch, he has to go pro.
Yeah.
Same with Austin. You can't risk another injury. You got to strike while the iron's hot. Your seniors, they're both going to have degrees. I think I think if they're healthy and they play well this year, and I was their parent or their family, I'd say go. Say, well, he could come back and be a first-round pick next year. He could also come back and hurt his foot again and not make a dime playing football at the professional level. I would say go. Now, there's some risk because of the past issues and things like that and the lack of production. But, I mean, Miles Boykin was a third-round pick, and he had one season.
Right.
That's
exactly.
It. That's it.
You had mentioned Mr. Rice, the offensive lineman that Notre Dame is recruiting. Andrew says, I think Notre Dame has a high chance on Rice. I don't know if you wanted to.
I think they have a chance. I don't think it's a high chance. No, yeah. I think they're in the game, but I think there are other schools ahead of Notre Dame right now.
Okay, I just got bumped. Are you still in that area? I'm at 227 now.
Yep. Yeah, and we kind of got to roll through these here a little bit.
Yep, absolutely.
The Fifth Horseman. You want to go ahead and read that one, Vince?
Yep. He says, I just wanted to say that I have the utmost respect for what your gentlemen are doing. Not only is this by far the best Irish pod I've listened to, but the insight you guys provide is second to none. Thanks, man. I appreciate that. That means a lot. Thank you.
Definitely. Appreciate that very, very much.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Much. Brent Byers has a question, Vince.
Yeah, everyone wants all the guys left on our board. Nwankpa, Rice, Lucas, Moss, Shrouth, Canoe. They're all top 100 guys. Of course you want them all. But the reality
I would somewhat remove Moss from that. I don't think he's really looking hard at Notre Dame right now. I don't think he's a realistic option right now. I think those other guys are more realistic at this point in time.
Makes sense.
Yeah, everybody wants them, but those are the battles you have to start winning.
Yes.
You know, Brent, I mean, right. I think you're spot on. I mean, everybody wants those guys. So winning those battles is even more impressive, you know, because look, getting Tobias Merriweather was huge. He's a top 50 player in my opinion, but they didn't beat Oklahoma for him. They didn't beat Alabama for him. They didn't beat Clemson or Ohio State for him. I don't care. As far as his evaluation, it's still a huge pickup. I'm making the point that the final step is beating the big boys for some more of these guys. And they've done that so far. I mean, you know, they've beaten Alabama, wanted Benjamin Morrison, they wanted Devin Moore, Ohio State, they beat Ohio State for guys. So I mean, they're starting to win more, but those final guys are going to be the true test of just how far this recruiting operation has come. Here's OC Irish fan. Hey guys, as anxious as most of us will be for the post-game analysis, give yourselves some slack for a bathroom break and a Built Bar. Go Irish. Well done. Very well done.
That is well done.
And I will be ordering some more Built Bars. I'll be using the promo code for the Irish Breakdown promo code, which is in the description bar below. But yeah.
That's great.
And the thing about it what we had to decide was, are we willing to start the show a little later, knowing we won't get as much emotion in order to do a longer show? Or do we do a quicker show where we get that raw emotion? But then we thought, if we do the original show where there's the raw emotion, we're the ones doing all the talking.
Right.
not you guys.
We'll be able to read your raw emotion.
If we do a show later, we'll get to give our analysis, but then we can also still have time to open it up to people that want to share their thoughts and feelings and those things about that one. So, yeah. Let's get to a few more.
You guys are really bringing the questions today.
Yeah. Brent Byer says, wait till Notre Dame wins a natty or seriously competes in the CFP. The recruiting is going to go nuclear, the biggest brand in football. I agree.
Yeah, no question.
I agree. I do have a request for everybody. When you see a troll like that Fire Vol guy coming to the show, don't engage. I had somebody text me and I got rid of him. Don't engage. That's what idiots like that want. And then it bumps things up and we lose
people's stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. Let's see some more questions here. Some people hammering Tennessee, so I'm trying to get through all that stuff so I can, this.
I figured I'm seeing some remnants of that even where I'm at.
Yeah. Nicholas Grosh asks, could you go over once again where X slot and boundary line up before the snap? Which one is likely to go in motion? Thanks for the insight. Yes, Vince, can you write that down as the football 101? We'll do that one here soon. We're having some issues with this thing rolling.
It's really annoying. Can I just say that?
Yeah, it is. It is. But we'll do that very soon, Nicholas. That's a very good idea. And that's actually was part of what we were going to do today.
Yes, it was.
So, yeah, it's frustrating. Anthony Solomon says this offense will average 40-plus points per game with Cone. He will make throws that Book didn't last year. This team has a legitimate chance this year due to the aforementioned quarterback. I don't disagree.
Yeah, it's definitely possible. Would I be surprised if they were 40-plus? I would not. I would not be surprised at all.
And I'm going to have an article coming out soon about that, and we've hinted about it. But part of it is because if you look at the teams that they play, there's a lot of defenses that gave up over 30 points per game last year on Notre Dame's schedule this year.
Right.
That you need to be able to take some advantage of. No question about it. So, all right, Vince, I think we're kind of – oh, here we go. Got a super chat from Mike Hoff that we missed.
Oh, man. Sorry,
Mike
dude.
says, hey, fellas, thanks for getting me through my work days. The best Irish show out there.
Thanks,
I appreciate that very, very much, Mike. And Mike just made the plunge and signed up for the Irish Breakdown message board. So he is there. Larry Friedel was also joined. So he's now part of that crew too. Larry is obviously in the chat today, so we appreciate that very, very much.
So I want to read a text that I got actually from my assistant coach from baseball, right? And I've been pushing. I'm like, dude, you're a huge Notre Dame fan. You need to check us out, right? I think he just didn't want to see me all that often since he sees me all the time at baseball. But he goes, I put on one of your podcasts last night, ended up listening to another one in addition and watching your YouTube channel when CJ committed. He goes, you guys are really good at breaking down Notre Dame, man. He goes, I learned a lot.
I appreciate that.
I know, right? I was like, it's about time. Welcome to the bandwagon, buddy.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Hey, Bob says, hey, Brian, now that you've had some time to dive into Everhart, do you feel that he would complete the receiver class in the same way that Bradshaw would, or would you still rather Bradshaw have a spot? I personally still would rather have Bradshaw, but it's kind of like if they like Everhart better, fine. I'm good with that. Right. I mean, Bradshaw's the more complete receiver right now. Everhart's the more explosive guy. If they said, hey, we'd rather take a chance on a guy that runs a 10-3, I'm not going to be like, that's dumb. I like the other guy better. I like the other guy better, but cool. Go for it. You put a guy that, is 5'11", can, take a screen and split the defense. And because if he gets a step, you're not catching him. I mean, 10-3 is like phenomenal speed.
Right.
And that's as a junior in high school. Right. So I honestly, hey, Bob, I'd be fine with that. If that's what they want, if that's the direction they wanted to go, I can live with that. I still like Xavier better, but it's kind of like, do you, which 5-star quarterback do you like better? Right. Like, well, yeah, okay. You're not going to lose and taking either one of them, right? To me,
exactly.
They're both good pickups. I'd be fine. And that's the thing we have to do as fans and as analysts is you can have the guys you like more. That's fine. But you also have to be open to say, hey, look, I like this guy more, but this guy's also really good and gives you what you're looking for. and be open to say, hey, look, that's okay. You can like a guy better or not. And then because what we tend to do, and this has happened to me before, I've got to watch myself from doing this, is you fall so in love with a certain player that if they don't get that guy and they go somewhere else, it's like, it's bad.
Terrible. Yeah, right.
Sometimes it is, right? Sometimes it isn't. Sometimes it's, I like that guy better, but this is still a good player. And no one's more to me, no one has to watch themselves against that more than me.
Sure.
To be honest with you. So I have to be careful with that. But yeah, I'd be fine either one of those. If they get either one of those guys, and I have a what's next article at irishbreakdown.com today looking at the receiving core, and that's one that I would say that was definitely one that I look at and say, yeah, I'm good either way. I have my preference, but both of them get the job done.
The comment right after that, Matthew Thomas says they did change the helmets, Vince. There's stars on the back. That's on the flap that's on the back of the helmet. They didn't change the helmet, which is what
that changes all the time. I mean, that's whatever.
It says Irish, it says Notre Dame.
Right.
I mean,
or the company of whoever built the helmet. Right.
Exactly. So they didn't change the actual
technically
helmet,
it's kind of part of the helmet, but yeah, I mean it's not like what Vince is talking about, like the color, a stripe, a shamrock, something
nonsense.
Like that.
Yeah, right. Exactly.
Yeah. I'm not gonna lie, I do like when they've put the shamrock on the helmet.
I did like the big green shamrock, like the simple green. Yeah. I didn't mind that.
They've done that a couple times, and I thought it looked good.
Yeah.
The worst ones were the two colored ones.
Oh, it was bad when the Jaguars did it. It was bad when Notre Dame did it. Yeah. Like it's just not a good look.
It's like Maryland, that they just like vomit the state flag onto the helmet. Like if you were to like have someone chew the flag up and barf it out, and then it lands on the helmet, and that's exactly what you're going to do. That's what Maryland's helmets look like. It's just gross.
Terrible.
Gross.
Terrible.
Kevin Mitchie asks, has NIL helped Notre Dame more, less, or no change in the most recent recruiting cycles? I think it's helped, Kevin. I don't know if it's been a needle mover yet. I still think it's too early to really evaluate that. Because I think they were in such good position with some of these guys before the NIL stuff started. It's hard for me to say definitely it made an impact, but I don't think it hasn't gone unnoticed either. We've had recruits tell us in interviews that Notre Dame did a great job of selling that and that kind of stuff. I just think it's too early to tell how much of a change it's had. But I would of those three options, the one I would definitely say it's definitely more. I don't think less or no change would be an accurate answer. I just don't know if it's how much more so far, and will it happen even more down the road as some of this stuff starts to build and build and build. That's the part that remains to be seen, in my opinion. Here's one. Keegan McLaughlin says, I'd love to see a gold jersey and green pants. I don't know how I feel about that, Vince.
I feel like that might be really ugly.
Like, because then it'd be gold, and green. I think that might.
It's hard to do a gold jersey that looks nice. I will say that.
It'd also be hard to do a gold jersey that matches the helmet.
It's very difficult.
Although I like Georgia Tech's gold jerseys.
That more of a muted gold.
Yeah. But it matches their helmets. That kind of jersey would not match Notre Dame.
There's no fabric that you're going to get that's going to match Notre Dame's helmets. Like that.
Would you imagine they came out with like some kind of like sparkly?
That would be terrible. It'd be like Dancing with the Stars. Like that would be
bedazzled jerseys.
That would be horrible.
That's not what Keegan's saying, but we're not taking a shot at you, Keegan. I'd be curious. Keegan, I'd be at least open enough that I'd want to see it first.
Yeah, fair enough.
If I was the person in charge of this for Notre Dame, and you came to me, I'd say, okay, let me see it. I want to see an act, not a picture. I want to see you make a gold jersey.
I'd be open to a lot of stuff for these Shamrock games because I think the sky's the limit. And you're right. If you're going to go for it, just go for it. I mean,
I think And if I was going to go gold, I'd probably want to go white pants with green in them, as opposed to pure green pants. I don't know. I've always got this thing is I only like green pants if the whole thing is green. Like my favorite Oregon uniforms are when they go to the tradition, like a bit of a throwback with the green, like the normal green, and then the green helmets with the O. I think those are their best uniforms. They're not exotic, but it's just a really sharp green.
Sure.
I'd have to see that, but I'd probably think like more white with some green in them. And then like maybe white numbers with like green outline in the gold jersey. Maybe something like that. Throw a green shamrock on the side. I'd at least be willing to see. I'd want to see that.
Fair enough.
I'd want to see that. Chief Brody, you were my guy until just now. I actually really like the mustard pants. Everyone hates them. Yeah. He says, when I was growing up, Notre Dame wore the lighter gold pants. They were mostly really bad. So maybe that association for me makes me partial to the dark pants from 2012 and on. So my question is, were they mostly bad, meaning Notre Dame was bad, or the gold pants were mostly bad?
I think he was saying the team was bad, and so that's what he associates.
But that's why I loved so much. See, because I imagine Chief's probably a little younger than us, Vince, so he doesn't really have the 88 recollection. But like that's partly why I love the uniforms for BC, because it was the 88 throw. Now I didn't like the black cleats. I'm all for not wearing black cleats. That's
some people really love black cleats.
Yeah.
Like that's I don't.
Yeah. I always liked lighter cleats.
Well, go check out at any sporting goods store. They really don't have a bunch of black cleats out there anymore because kids aren't buying them.
Yeah, but I loved those color pants. I did. I thought they looked good in person. I thought they looked good on TV. Like somebody sent me a picture where the gold was really dark and they didn't match. That's not what they look like in person.
Yeah,
they didn't. I mean,
they were great. I loved those.
There.
Those were great. They're so easy to read from the press box too. The numbers.
Well, Darius asks, how long has Notre Dame been doing the Shamrock game? Vincent Bryan, has it been a tradition forever? No, it started with 08. It was the Washington State game.
Christ is the one that got hurt.
I think it was
Washington State.
Was it 08?
Plus his Achilles.
09. Yeah, because Jimmy was hurt, right? I'm gonna have to look that up. I think it was 2008. I think it was 2008 is when they had. Maybe it's 2009. Let me go look. It was 2009.
Okay.
It's Washington State. They won 40-14. It was the last win of the season. That made them 6-2. And then they lost to Navy the next week. And then Pitt. And then UConn. And then Stanford. Unbelievable.
Yep.
Yeah.
It's not good.
Zach Gardner, I think the darker pants way better than the old lighter ones, especially with the white away game jerseys. Now, see, I can dig the mustard pants a little bit. They're more tolerable on the road than they are at home, but I don't like them at any point in time. I do not like them.
Sam, I am.
Yep.
Saw where you were going there.
Yep. Let's see here. Get the last few here as we wrap up these questions. Whew. A lot of hate for Tennessee. The Yankee Stadium ones. D-Rock says, if memory serves me right, in the Pitt game, Lindsay already nursing an injury, yet the play call was out an all-out sprint for him to go down the field for a long and complete pass. That really upset me. Yeah, I mean, I get that. I guess my whole thing was I wouldn't have even had him in the game at that point in time. But if he can't sprint as fast as he can in a straight line, he shouldn't have been playing anyway. I didn't feel like why would you risk having him in the game when it was 45-3?
Sure.
I mean, I get wanting to get him some playing time, but but he just wasn't going to be healthy last year. And even when he was playing, he didn't. I mean, even on that play, he just didn't have any juice. He didn't have any juice last year at all. Mike Huff says, I think Lorenzo Styles will have a huge impact this season. What do you guys think?
Could be. I mean, he could.
Yeah. I don't know if I'd say huge.
He'll have an impact. Yeah. I agree with that.
Yeah.
Hit that next one too, Brian. Matthew Southgate says, I'm confident in Jack because he was not developed by Notre Dame. I have not seen a quarterback developed by us, even when we have gotten 5 stars. Best development was Reese by his father.
Meaning Tommy was what he was when he showed up.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think there's merit to that.
I think there is too.
Yeah.
I just thought that was an interesting take on the confidence in Jack Cohn because he's kind of coming in as a finished product.
He is not wrong. We'll see if that changes. Tyler says all the QBs that transferred didn't really pan out at their new destination, just missed evals. I think more than bad development, but discouraging either way. I've heard this before, and I strongly disagree with that. So this whole thing about none of the transfers worked out, right? So number one, Gunnar Kiel was really good until he basically broke his face. Remember, he had that really – no, I'm not joking. He got a really bad concussion.
No, really?
His first year at Cincinnati, he was really good. And he took a really big hit. And I'm going to try to find it, see what year it was. It was his first year as a starter was 2014. He threw for over 3,200 yards and 31 touchdowns, 13 picks. And he got hit against, I'm trying to remember what, and that year he threw one pass against Tulane. But he threw I can't remember which game it was, but he was never the same after that. never the same guy after that. And then the next year came out, 19 touchdowns, 11 picks, and then he was benched by the next year. He just was never the same guy after that big hit. But he was pretty good that first year at Cincinnati. Malik Zaire made a bad decision to go to Florida. Just a bad choice. And Everett Golson actually put up good numbers at Florida State, but I don't think that was the move. Should have been the move for him. But again, he was kind of what people have to understand is, Dane Chris going to Kansas. By the time these guys leave Notre Dame, you can't just erase the influence that was happening to them and then just turn them back to what they were in high school. Like that's the development that cost them from being successful at Notre Dame didn't just magically go away when they went to the new school. So Gunnar Kiel was successful. Again, Brandon Wimbush, to me, he failed at Notre Dame because his confidence was shot. That just doesn't come back with all guys. And then the last quarterback that transferred, I'd say he's panned out pretty flipping good so far, in my opinion. Right? I mean, people project him to be a first-round NFL draft pick next year. That's a little early for me. I think his game's got to improve a lot more, but he's pretty flipping good last year. Brian Kelly was talking about how Ian Book was struggling early in the year because he didn't have an offseason, even though he was a 2-year starter and was playing with the same guys he played with before. Phil Jurkovec goes to a new school with new coaches, new teammates, new offense, everything, gets no spring ball, jacked up fall, and he played pretty well. He played pretty well early, too. I think he threw for like 300 yards in like 4 of his first 5 games or something ridiculous like that.
Right.
So, yeah, I would say he's the most recent one has panned out. So I don't think any of those were misevaluations, in my opinion. I think the only guy that you could say was, I think maybe Dane Chris was a misevaluation just because he never really picked up the reading of the defenses thing. But that's another guy that tore his knee up and had some injuries. But the evaluation there was he's 6'5", he's athletic, and he has a bazooka for an arm. Well, he was 6'5", he was athletic, and he had a bazooka for an arm. But I don't think Malik Zaire was a misevaluation. Malik, when he played at Notre Dame, was really good. Everett Golson was really good. Mm-hmm. He didn't, and so I mean, I wouldn't necessarily agree with that. So, yeah. Let's see. Chief Brody, here's a good one, Vince.
Yeah.
Do you fellas think that Harbaugh makes a BK 2017-esque renaissance at Michigan this year? I hope not.
I do not, because I think he's like psychologically unhinged. Like I'm, and I don't mean that to be funny. I'm serious. Like I don't think he has a grasp on everything that's going on between his own ears, let alone to run a program and get it back to where it needs to be. I have no faith in him as a leader right now. I just don't. And so, no, I don't think that will be the case.
I get where he's coming from because, you can fire a bunch of coaches, bring a bunch of new guys in. A couple things for me beyond what Vince said. So number one is what Vince said. But number two, I don't think that I don't think this group has the talent level that Notre Dame's team had in 2017 and 2018. I also don't think that some of the coaches he hired were as good as the guys he hired at Notre Dame. I'm not a big Josh Gaddis fan, but he was already there. I don't love the move of Sharon Moore to the offensive line. His son's still an assistant, and tight ends have not been good since he took over that position. And this guy from Baltimore, maybe from the Ravens, may be good, but I can't really evaluate him the way that I did Mike Elko because I saw Mike Elko call games. I saw Mike Elko build a defense. I knew what Mike Elko could do.
Right.
I don't know what this guy can do, so I can't have the confidence in him that I had in Mike Elko. So maybe it works. I'd say the Washington game's the key. If they can beat Washington, I think that could give them some confidence to kind of build. But again, I just Notre Dame had an elite offensive line. They had a dynamic quarterback. I mean, who a big time running back. I just don't know if this group has that kind of talent to turn that around too. And the schedule's going to be challenging-ish. You know what I mean? There's 4 or 5 really tough games on there. So I think it's going to be how they handle those first few games. If they can start getting some confidence, then I think they'll win, but they're not going to be as good as the Notre Dame team was in 2017. And then they're definitely not going to follow up that with an undefeated year in 2022. I absolutely believe that one. Here we go. Here's another Matthew, all about the quarterback conversation today, Vince.
Yes, he is. He says, we have to hope Reese can develop quarterbacks better than Kelly. Without quarterback development, we cannot win a national championship or see our true potential. Not saying the guy has to be a first overall pick, but solid development. Absolutely agree.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I agree with that. No question.
Will Jansen says, anyone know what time caps will be announced? I assume BK has a press conference today. I don't believe he has a press conference today. Does he, Vince?
Not to my knowledge. The next time we hear from Brian, I can look it up while you look for the next thing.
Yeah, I think it's going to be a thing where they're going to put something out on
Just
Twitter.
Put it out there. Yeah, it's not going to be at a press conference.
Kind of like what they did with the uniform today, the uniform launch.
Right.
Just because he said they're going to do it on Monday doesn't mean that they'll actually do it on Monday.
We don't hear from Brian Kelly again until Saturday.
Okay.
So we got Marcus Freeman on Tuesday, and then which is tomorrow, and then Tommy Reese on Thursday. So there you go. There's your order for the week.
Okay. Let's see. Ladarius, our resident Alabama fan. You guys are amazing. Vince, Brian, Andrew Bone, who does the Alabama Rival site, and Paul Feinbaum makes my week go by faster. Thanks, guys. I appreciate all you do. Y'all do YouTube for free. Hey, for free, right? We're not.
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Exactly.
Let's see here. Edward says, I will say that Major League Baseball, or at least Cardinals Major League Baseball, remains very affordable. It may be different for the Cubs now that the Cubs are a AA team. The demand for tickets may have ebbed a little bit. Not really, because Cub tickets were kind of expensive when they weren't good too, right?
Oh, yeah. That's the thing. Going to Wrigley Field is still a thing, regardless of the play that's on the field. But yeah, tickets are – look, I have 7 people in my family. If I'm taking everybody to a game, $30 a ticket, you're already, getting up there. And then, I'm sorry, concessions are out of control.
Yeah.
I mean, they're
even expensive at like a South Bend Cubs game.
Right. Concessions are out of control. So, yeah, it's crazy expensive to take anybody anywhere.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Benjamin Carchi, how do you guys feel about the people calling the Notre Dame games?
Well, we haven't heard them because Drew Brees is going to be the color guy, and we have yet to hear Drew Brees in a booth.
Tirico's still doing the play-by-play this year, right? I
believe so, yes. And Tappan will be on the sideline.
Honestly, I don't know. I don't know where I stand with Notre Dame fans on this because I've never had this conversation, but I've always said the guy I'd love to have do play-by-play is Gus Johnson. That's my dude. But the few times I don't listen to a lot of Notre Dame games on TV just because Flutie, I would just mute it. Plus, I don't want to have anyone else's opinion influencing my evaluation of the game.
So bad.
But the times I have gone back and listened to games, like after I'll do breakdowns, I'll then go back and just kind of watch it. I like Mike Tirico doing games.
Yeah, I do.
He does a really good job.
Yeah. He does his homework. I mean, he's a professional.
And he makes it fun. I mean, because I went back. So after I did my grades for Clemson, I was like, I want to watch this game because it's just, you know. And I'm like, boy, he did a great job. He gets excited for Notre. He plays balance. He's not a pro Notre Dame guy, but he's also not like fighting against being pro Notre Dame like some others have done in the past.
Right.
But he gets excited when things happen and makes it fun. And he's knowledgeable. He's prepared. I think he does a good job. I mean, I got no issues with the play-by-play guy. The color guy, I don't know what Drew Brees is going to do. I don't know if he's going to be like the next version of Tony Romo, or if he's just going to be, whatever. So, yep. Yeah, we'll see. And get to some more questions here. We got to get kind of wrapping up here. We're getting kind of close to the end.
We are.
Chief Brody, it might be weird, but I watch a lot of Michigan football just to see them lose. It's not weird. If it is weird, I'm with you. Yeah. Yep. Okay, so my wife jumped into the show because we're going to be grilling out after the show today. My wife says, my grandmother's visiting us. Grammy says if you keep going on the show much longer and don't get to grilling burgers, then she will make you try on the gold bedazzle shirt and wear it at the tailgate. So I gotta wrap this up.
Wow,
I gotta wrap this up.
Wrong.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's an expression. He got drilled and got a really bad concussion.
Broke his
right?
Face. That's why I made a face too when you said that. I was like, all right.
Yeah. Anthony, what about the all gold uniforms during Ty Willingham era versus Maryland? I don't remember those being all gold. I thought they had green in them. I don't remember all
I'm
gold.
gonna have to do a Google search here.
That would be 2002. Let's see here. So I have to find those. But anyway, so I shouldn't have done this. Got people missing Phil, dropping knives. I miss Phil. Sorry about that. Dropping Dime says Wimbush would have been something special if we developed him. I agree with that to a degree, but I actually think Brandon also has to take some responsibility for his lack of success too. I think Brandon didn't handle some of the things. I think that Brandon was not developed in some ways, but I also think Brandon didn't handle some circumstances well. I think he's the reason that he didn't play well against Miami. I don't blame anybody else for that. I think, and then Brandon's responsible for how he handled the loss to Miami. No one else is responsible for that. So I love Brandon. I think he's a great kid. I love his family, but he also has to take some ownership of the fact he didn't bounce back from his struggles the way that he should have. Now, 2018, there were some things that they did scheme-wise. It was clear that they were just setting the table for Ian Book. But if Brandon would have played better if Brandon would have played in the last 4 games like he played in the first 7 or 8 or whatever, he's the starting quarterback in Notre Dame's, in the playoff that year. I don't blame anybody else for that one. No question. Sid Irish, can we stick with the 2019 throwbacks and black shoes, please?
The only picture I could find is they had that gold stripe down the side.
Oh yeah, that was.
But that's all I can find. But
Yep. Dropping Dime says, hope to see you guys at the Notre Dame versus USC game. We plan on being there for sure. Searcher Green misses Alex Flanagan. Michael Shea thinks they should get Brady Quinn in the booth.
You're not alone. I think he would be excellent. Yeah. I really do.
Nolan Esparza, Tirico is great. Flutie probably wouldn't have been so bad if he wouldn't have attempted to hide. If he would have even attempted to hide his hatred for Notre Dame. See, that didn't bother me because I couldn't get past the fact he was so unprepared for knowing who these teams are.
Yeah, right.
Like it just was unprofessional to me. Like it was so obvious he done very little prep for some of these games and showed very little understanding of who these teams were. Like he just make these comments. You're like, do you not watch any of these teams play at ever? Do you not you kind of do show prep on your way to the game on Saturday morning or something?
Watching a little film on your phone on the way in. Yeah, exactly.
It was just so, and it's that's not even close to being how something was. It just, that kind of bothered me. That really, really bothered me. So, okay. That's going to be it. So that's going to be it for today's show. So, hey, listen, before you go, please hit the like button. Please subscribe. Please hit the notification bell. Please sign up. Join us on the message boards at irishbreakdown.com. You can find it at boards.irishbreakdown.com. Built Bar, we still have that going with Built Bar. You
Absolutely.
Get the link in the description bar. Anything you buy, use the promo code Irish Breakdown. You get 10% off your entire purchase. And if you come check out the website, guess what? It's free. So is our YouTube channel. We keep giving it away for free.
I know.
But if you really want to join us on a full-time basis, we do have our premium message board network, which is the only of our 6 platforms that we put any premium content on. So would love for you guys and gals to all join us there. Be a lot of fun. And now I want to get this last comment in because I think this is so accurate. Nicholas said, agree, Tirico is solid and Dungy was the best analyst we had.
I love
Dungy and Mayock were both. If either one of those guys
Dungy.
did. Yeah.
I love Dungy, and I knew he was a placeholder for Drew Brees. I mean, I knew that consciously, but I would have loved to continue to have Tony Dungy. I thought he was so good. Good. And he was good at making technical things sound more understandable than Mike Mayock exactly.
was.
Yeah, I agree.
But now that for me, Mike Mayock didn't bother me. I loved Mike Mayock. I can understand why some other people didn't like Mike Mayock. I think that's what made Tony Dungy so good is because he could explain things that were where I could understand it as a coach. I'm like, yeah, okay, I get you. But then also my wife could understand it. You know what I mean? He wasn't a football coach.
Yeah, he did a really good job.
Yeah, I thought he was. I was disappointed when I found out he was the short term, and I kind of knew he wasn't going to be here long term. But I was hoping he'd just fall in love with it and want to stay.
Yeah, me too.
It
is what it is.
So that's going to be it for today's show. Everybody have a great rest of your day. We will talk to you all again very, very soon.